I'd like to call the meeting to order. Document the time as 6:32, and if you would join me, please, for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is going to be called the theatrical pause while we. There we go. All right. All present and accounted for. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to lead everybody into about a couple minutes of mindfulness so we can just arrive and land and remember why we're here and what we're doing. So everybody can close your eyes if you're comfortable. Get in a nice settled seat, and you can take a deep breath in and feel your spine rise, and take an out breath. Feel yourself settle into your seat. Take a deep breath in, stretching up, breathe out, settling in, and one more time, inhale. And exhale, and just settle into breathing. Feeling the air moving inside of your body. Feeling your feet planted firmly on the ground, reminding us that we're here. As you breathe in, you can notice any stress or tightness you're carrying in your shoulders. Breathe out into it, all the way down into your feet. And as we feel ourselves breathing, we can remind ourselves that we're here for the better of our children, of the students of Winooski, and the families and our community. And we govern for the highest good of all concerned. And on your next exhale, you can open your eyes and come into the room.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's always a good segue from the rest of the day. Okay, agenda review and adjustments. Got a couple of items. You've each been handed a couple of sheets. Almost all. With a couple of additional teacher nominations. We're going to add these to the consent agenda as a continuation of item C in the consent agenda. And one other add to the agenda we're going to do is in section 9E. We have a bid. We've been talking about the walk-in cooler for the cafeteria, and we got some bids in late Friday. They dealt with them on Monday, so we got them that we'll add as 9E to vote on that and award that. Any other items for adjustments? Okay. Focus on learning, building learning communities.
So I will kick it off and introduce our first presenter is Sarah Robb, our new JFK Elementary principal, getting nearer and nearer to her first year here in Winooski, doing a great job. And under the broader umbrella of building learning communities, you're going to hear about the beginnings of programming called Responsive Classroom, which is a widely known and used and research-based program to create strong communities where students are well known and cared about by adults and each other. And she's going to focus on that beginning piece of the morning meeting, which is a component of Responsive Classroom. And then from there, we will move into the learning community, which manifests in advisory in the middle high school, and you'll hear a bit about that later.
Yep, right after this. Community, our focus on learning section has become a must for anybody who comes and visits. So. You got the lights.
So you're good. I'll get the lights.
So I'm going to hand these to this, and this comes later, and I couldn't fit all of what teachers and students said, so there's a couple typos.
You pass this around. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Is that better or the other side?
The other side would be better.
Give me a second, check it.
Ah, yes.
Better?
There we go.
Okay. So, we started this year, I started this summer, and realized that our students were expected to come in and start academics at like 8 exactly. And so we started talking as a staff about what our students needed to have a more successful morning and a more successful day. And we talked a lot about responsive classroom as a staff over the summer pre-service, and specifically focused on morning meeting. So responsive classroom is a approach to teaching that has lots of independent research that shows that it helps students become more academically successful. And it really focuses on the fact that how kids learn is just as important as what they're learning, and that they need to be ready socially and emotionally in order to learn for the day. So there are 4 really key components to responsive classroom: that the academics that they're learning are engaging, that students are motivated to learn, that it's a positive community within the classrooms, but also within the school for students. That classroom teachers and UA teachers and instructional assistants, anyone who interacts with students, have effective classroom management skills. And that what we're doing with kids are developmentally appropriate. So what you do with a kindergartner isn't going to be what you do with a 5th grader. So this year we really focused on morning meeting in the classroom. Every class starts their day with breakfast in the classroom, and then every class does a morning meeting, except for 5th grade, which we're changing for next year. But 5th grade goes to their arts rotation and then comes back and does their morning meeting, just because of the way the schedule is. Next year, we've left 8 to 8:45 as sacred in the schedule, so that everyone will be doing their morning meeting first thing. Okay. So there's 4 components of morning meeting. The first one is a greeting, and then you do a share, you do an activity, and you do a morning message. Generally, the morning message is written up when kids first come in, and there's a question at the bottom. So as they're eating breakfast, they go up, they answer the question, and then it's reviewed at the end of the morning meeting. So the greeting happens every morning first thing. It's a way for students and teachers to greet each other by name. It's usually an interactive greeting. So Miss Knapp's class, now they're 5th graders and it's spring, so they're a little punchy. They videotaped themselves. This is called the lumberjack greeting. And so I can show Tori. So what you do is you pretend you're a lumberjack, and you do this, and then you put your hand on top with your thumb up. And then I say, "Good morning, Tori." Like you're sawing. And then you turn and you do it all the way around.
Good morning.
Good morning, Tori.
Ready?
Coordination.
Yeah,
Morning,
Nice to see
morning,
you.
morning, good
Welcome.
morning.
Okay,
Yes,
good,
morning.
great, thank you.
Yes. Okay. Good morning, good morning, afternoon.
Yes.
Oh, Sean.
Thumb, it's not a thumb war.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. Good morning, LaDanya. I love your blue hoodie today. Thank you.
Okay. So as this is getting around, this is getting to some ELL students. So they're able to participate in morning meeting as fully as any other students. They get some extra support with the language component of it. So then they do a sharing, and there's lots of ways to do sharing. It can be, tell me something that happened. What did you have for dinner last night? There's lots of ways, but there's also some, lots of resources for teachers, and there's ideas for sharing for them as well. So it's not just like, okay, what do you want to share? Because in kindergarten, it'll be like, I have a dog. And then they'll be like, I have a dog too, and my dog has spots, and it'll take hours. So this was an example of a sharing, my favorite season. So you say to kids, okay, you're going to be talking about what's your favorite season and why. And that's our share for today. And you give the kids some think time, and then you go around and they'll say, like, my favorite season is summer because I like to swim. Or so it's a sharing, it gives some personal information, and it helps students make connections to each other. So then there's a group activity, and this is where, as a school, we've blended some things together. So some of our mindfulness activities happen at this point. Some of our movement activities happen at this point. Part of it is just the teachers gauging how the day is. This is also a space where teachers are putting in literacy and math into morning meeting. And so it's just an activity that students work on together. So there is an example, I won't make you do it, but there is an example. So this is, first and second graders, like losing teeth is a big deal for them, right? So you have the poem up,
Folks too.
you read it, the teacher reads it, then the teacher reads it, and the kids do a call and response, and then you read it together as a class. And then you make up movements to go with the poem to help the kids remember it, okay? And these things become an archive that teachers have that they can pull out and do with students at different points during the year. So this is just an example of an activity that they would do. And then the morning message. So the morning message is written before the students get there. There's the question on the bottom. And it's really a way for kids to know what's happening that day. So if there's a schedule change, you're going to put it in your morning message so that you can talk about it first thing in the morning. So this was an example of a morning message, an old one from 2008, but good morning, respectful readers. So they, the underlining and the bubbling are things that as they read them, the class does that together. Some teachers misspell words and the kids have to find them. They leave blanks, the kids have to fill them in with what their UA is for the day. There's lots of variety on it. And then so this is just talking about what they're going to do that day academically. And then the bottom says, write something you can do to help yourself focus on reading today. So that's where the students have to come up with an idea about what they're going to do to help themselves with reading for the day. So I asked the kids and the adults to reflect on morning meetings so far this year. This is the first year it's been done at JFK, I think ever. And I wanted to hear how teachers and kids were feeling about it. So you have a 5-page double-sided thing. I asked for a few, and this is what I got. So if you go to page 3, it's backwards on yours than it is up here. There are some student reflections. So I was going to read a couple up here and then highlight just a few that are in there. So it's a good way to start the day because it's nice to greet each other, give each other compliments, practice mindfulness, and play fun games. We have a secret class handshake that we do. Mr. Schlater's class actually has like a silent secret handshake they do in morning meeting every day. Everyone's interacting with each other, even the teacher. So if you look at some of these, like number 8 says it's a good way to start the day because it's nice to greet each other. Oh, I said that one. 13 and 14 talk about mindfulness. If you go to the second page, number 54, says I'm not hungry at morning meeting because I get breakfast every day. So totally unsolicited, I swear. And then if you go to the last page, number 69 says I like the morning message because I know what our day is going to look like, especially if it's different, like on half days or if we have an assembly or a play to go to. So having that structure and routine for the kids, I think, it's been really important. And then I asked the teachers to reflect. I took their names off. They had like written their names and I took all that off. But this one says, morning meeting is a great way to start the day with my class. We begin by greeting each other in a fun, respectful way. Students who may have come in with problems outside the classroom usually join in, and you can see their body language and facial expressions change from stressed and or angry to relaxed. Morning meeting is a time when everyone respects each other and learns how to interact with each other who may not be their everyday friends. It's a great time to teach social issues and also help model social thinking. So there's some really great teacher reflections there. But, if you need to fall asleep tonight, you can read those. So teaching the teachers how to do this comes with professional development. So this year, when we came back from February break, that Monday, all teachers were required to be here, and we had a full day training on responsive classroom. Okay, so we had 2 trainers come and run 2 sessions of 30 people each, because that's max. And then IAs could come if they wanted. They weren't paid, but they could come if they wanted, and we actually had a lot come. So that was the first thing we did. And then we're doing the 4-day Responsive Classroom 1 course. We're doing it in June and we're doing it in August. And all the teachers are doing it, except for one, because she's already done RC1 and RC2. So she's like way ahead of the game. She's the only one. And then I think I'm going to have some room in August and I can offer it to IAs if they want to come. They won't be paid, but they can come. And our after school teachers at Thrive are going to come and participate in the one in August as well. With each 4-day course comes a 1-day workshop. So we will work out what our staff feels like they need, and then throughout the year we'll have 2 1-day workshops. So we may do both that first day back in February, and they can choose which one they want to go to. We just haven't figured out what that is yet. Okay. So this is one piece in a really big, if you guys have seen the big triangle that everything is, the multi-tiered systems. So this is one piece of that. So we took a team to Mason's Care in March, right? And that's sort of our basis for all of this work. That's about the 40 developmental assets and helping students be successful through asset building. And then this summer, we're taking a team to BEST, and that's where we're going to work on our MTSSB. So multi-tiered system of support with behavior is the new lingo. And that's really 4 components. So it's the social emotional well-being of students, which is the responsive classroom and the social thinking. The health, which is our wellness coordinator. And then we're talking about grant funding a 50% health teacher for the elementary school next year to do that work with our kids. The academic is the 3rd piece, and that's our work with VRI for Readers and Writers Workshop. It's our math best practices, it's our next gen science standards, and that really solid first instruction. And then the 4th piece is the behavioral framework, and that comes into play with our behavior coach and our student support room, our majors and minors that we've come up with in that whole system. So this whole triangle is really supported by the PBIS framework, which is the other piece that we're going to be doing at BEST. Just similar to the STARS, but different, so we're going to be adapting that program over the summer. Do you guys have questions?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. It feels so related to that even in the morning meeting that they're practicing effective communication skills and cross-cultural understanding, and the foundation of it is just building good relationships, which is fabulous. Good. Ian's.
One other comment about
Yeah.
success of a program potentially. You've done a lot of surveys over time, and the worst survey results you get are where everybody answers with one word. And
No
to
one did
see,
that.
and to see with, plenty
Many kids.
of response is always good, but it's also a sign of things that are underlying that seem to be positive, so sounds like it's doing well.
Yeah, it has been.
Start.
How do PBIS and responsive classroom fit together?
So PBIS is really the framework of a system. So that's really the school-wide system, and then the responsive classroom sort of fits underneath that framework. So I actually have a document, which I didn't bring because I didn't want to overwhelm you, that aligns PBIS and responsive classroom and how they can support each other.
Gotcha.
So I'm happy to share that.
Okay. How does how does the whole framework impact discipline in the school and in the classroom?
So that's a huge piece of it. So that's that whole behavioral piece. So when you look at the triangle, it's the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And then, so it's divided this way, but then the triangle's also divided this way.
Okay.
And so it's the social, emotional, health, academic, and behavioral.
Mm-hmm.
So that all supports the tier 1 behavior, which is responsive classroom, morning meeting, and then the tier 2, which are some more like take a break, those kind of interventions, and then the tier 3, which are the more intensive behavioral interventions.
Gotcha.
So it's like a two-way triangle.
Yeah. I gotcha. A matrix triangle.
Sort of, yeah. A slanted matrix.
We'll probably get more at the June Focus on Learning. We're going to talk about behavioral management systems across the school. So we'll probably get into more detail and maybe bring that graphic for it.
Cool. Great.
I feel like it's been pretty effective. I mentor in the kindergarten, and I see on the board they have their morning meeting, and sometimes I ask the kids about it, and they just tell me a few comments here and there and how they enjoy their mornings. And I feel like the atmosphere is also very fun, and like all the kids they're really friendly with each other. I think in first grade I did something similar to this, but it wasn't established throughout the entire school, so it's nice to see.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Lucas, shall I introduce you, or would you like to introduce yourself?
That'd make it less awkward for me, sure.
I can't do it in French, I'm sorry, but Lucas is a French teacher extraordinaire. He also is a middle school soccer coach and working with me and another guy to create another soccer opportunity for some middle school boys this fall. Very engaged young teacher in our community in many, many ways, and has stepped up with some other teachers, Amy Scherer, Shannon Bundy. Anyone else?
That's
Pretty much
three.
the triad,
Yeah.
to really take on this work of constructing a meaningful and sustainable advisory in the middle high school. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you for having me. The overview of what I'll talk about, first is just let you know what advisory currently is, what it looks like in the middle and high school, considering where we've come from and where we are right now and where we hope to go. And finally, I'll just give you a breakdown of the key parts of what we want advisory to look like in 2016-2017, which is the work that we've been working on this entire year, I would say. So that's what we're going to talk about. So what is advisory? This is very, very the basic rundown of what it is, so you can imagine it. It's a system of communities inside of the school, the middle high school. Every student is in, I talk loudly. Every student is in an advisory. Advisories are around 8 to 16 students each. That can vary. And advisories in the high school are currently about 20 minutes. The middle school, the two teams, they vary in time, but you're anywhere from, I think, 60 to 90 minutes, depending on the team.
Every day.
That's what advisory is. This is a really complicated breakdown. I'm not going to go through all these points, but I just want you to paint a broad picture of what advisory has been in the past. And we can have students speak to this as well. Hello, arc-en-ciel. Rainbow's in my advisory, actually. This is appropriate. 2015, 2016, where we currently are. In the middle school, you have advisory as a multi-age home base for students with a lot of functional elements already in place. They're doing a lot of stuff that we're hoping to capitalize on and build upon already in the middle school. In the high school, this was the first year we actually required that you be in your specific assigned advisory. You cannot go somewhere else for that period of time. Before this time, maybe I can actually have the students do this. What was advisory before this year? How would you describe it?
Thanks. It depended on really who was the teacher in charge of the advisory, because some students would really gravitate towards certain teachers that they thought were really cool, I guess you could say. Some advisories, sorry, I say TA, it's the old-fashioned way. It slips sometimes. Some TAs were just empty and just full of nobody, and I am in a TA where the teacher is very well known and very enjoyable, and so I'd have a lot of kids over in my TA, and that could get pretty chaotic, very annoying. Now that it's now that no one's allowed to just randomly pop in, we have maybe 4 kids who show up consistently, 3 who kind of show up sometimes.
Okay, so you see some things being highlighted here. Number one is the switch from saying TA to advisory. What we're trying to do is reestablish what this actually is and what it represents for the students. We're trying to change the entire outlook of it, which takes time and new cycles of students, I would say. You're on your way out, sadly. But we're trying to remake advisory so it's meaningful for every group, every student, if that makes sense to you all. So in the high school level, we had some advisories piloting some intentional elements. We had 3 teachers working to develop a vision and a curriculum for advisory that we'll actually be able to put into action. We still see uneven amounts of, strong communities and collaboration. Some advisories are running well and doing certain things, others aren't. Our hope is to make every advisory run a certain way, a really effective group of people. So our vision for 2016 you see on the board. What's bolded and underlined are your keys. For next year, we're trying to make advisory the home base for all PLP work. I would say that's the biggest project of them all, the most important thing. We're also going to have clearly established roles and responsibilities for both advisees and advisors. We will have GX-based monthly themes, hopefully running in the high school. And then this piece of each advisory becoming a strong and meaningful community for each of its members is an absolute important piece to this. In the middle school, there is talk of incorporating developmental design into their current system. So they're doing a lot of things that the high school is not already. They're going to bolster their game with developmental design, while the high school is going to take what they're doing already and hopefully make it into our own, I would say. Beyond the long-term vision, we're taking it step by step. This cannot happen all at once. People would run away and be scared. Beyond, the high school should also adopt multi-age groups. We're looking beyond the 20-minute time period. Advisories become the central component of a house model shift, and there is a full curriculum in place with flexibility for individual advisors inside of it. That's all huge picture stuff. That's where we want to eventually end up. Today we're just talking about 2016, 2017, so you know what we're doing. This is shared with you, by the way. I would encourage you to look through it. I'm going through this rather quickly. So what's been done so far, this is mainly the triumvirate and also one group I'll talk about in a second. We went to the Nellie Mae Conference, a group of teachers, administrators, parent, school board member. There's been year-round advisory work, 2 high school teachers and a math teacher. In that time, we developed our purpose statement. We've begun building the curriculum. And once a month, we check in with middle high school staff for feedback. What do you think so far? In addition, we had a task force meeting. It included students, teachers, administrators, guidance, parents, and the school board member again. This is an opportunity for feedback, and we established the roles and responsibilities for 2016-2017. We are also anticipating one more advisory task force meeting before this year's end, where we can hopefully get some more feedback and establish some more clarity about what we're actually doing next year. What's come out of our work, and these are the most salient points that you're about to see. This is where you'd want to tune in particular. The vision/purpose statement. The purpose of the WMHS advisory is to cultivate healthy and caring relationships within the school community while fostering academic and personal growth in students. This is at the core of the entire thing. Community. Being part of something. Advisory is a place where every student is part of a community in which they feel safe, valued, and heard. We hear this stuff. It's very different to put it into action, and you need these pockets of inside a school to make it happen. Advisory needs to be that place. We're not quite there yet. In advisory, we ensure that student interests, passions, and talents are at the center of a personalized learning experience. Again, this is the home base where this stuff happens. Your relationship with your advisor, relationship between advisor and advisee is the key. This is someone who knows you well as a student and as a person. You work on your plan together, would be the idea. And that, of course, anticipates work on the PLP. Advisory will be the home base for work and collaboration on individual PLPs, along with student progression through graduate expectations and graduate proficiencies. So you can start to see it all come together. would be the idea. Advisory is a centerpiece for the school change we're hoping to enact. The advisor roles and advisee roles, don't want to get into too much. Just note the advisor becomes an advocate for each one of their advisees. They get to know them as people, their interests, passions, learning styles, needs. They help students with the PLP. They conduct regular one-on-one check-ins. They communicate with home regularly. Something somewhat lacking in the high school level has been conferences. The middle school does this right. We're hoping to take some of what they do. What can we do to make that connection stronger? And then advisee roles. This was all developed by our task force. To participate and have an open mind, to work on their PLP, communicate struggles and successes, and contribute to the creation and functioning of this healthy community within the school. So the idea is having pockets of communities inside the school, hopefully to make the school a stronger place. Next steps, continue developing our curriculum and the tools that we're going to be using. This also might look like professional development for teachers if we're going to be asking them to do certain things. Continue collaboration with students and staff. Incorporation, as I said, of the middle school developmental design program. Next year, we really get to take it up a notch. This past year, we didn't do too much in the way of change. I think we were trying to pave the way for that change. So there are pockets of successful advisories, but not across the board. This is the year we take that next step. We'll see how it goes. And then we will keep considering the implementation beyond 2016, 2017. Hopefully it will inform us. I didn't give students opportunities to talk here. If you guys want to chime in on anything around advisory, what you've seen, noticed, I didn't build you into this. I'm sorry.
I've personally had a good experience. I'm not sure if that's because of the whole new system or just because I have a lot of cool people in my TA, but I do know some students who have had not good experience with this, and that's really, I think, maybe because of the rigid structure. They're not really fond of the way that, I guess you could say the way their new advisory is structured before they like the leniency of TA. I know it's also probably because it's a new change and people don't like change, but I think maybe there should be some worry about students who do not feel comfortable in their advisory or who are just not having fun in their advisory. I think there should be a way for them to express that sentiment and maybe for them to be able to do something.
One of our concerns we're trying to work with in terms of should students have choice as to what advisory they're in, how do you deal with that? I think the important thing we're working on is an adult in the building who knows you, who you connect with, who is that person? That is under concern list, and I hear you. We're caught between the world of leniency and rigidity, I suppose. It's tough to be in between. Thank you.
I think one of the best ways to really fully implement TA/advisory is that in middle school we had so much time in our TAs, whereas in high school we only have 20 minutes, and so 20 minutes is not even close to as much as one would like, especially if you want to create a community where you can be safe and comfortable in. Personally, I've also had a good experience in my advisory, although the first year it was kind of rough because it was your first year. But advisory's been, I'd say it's been going through a lot of ups and downs, and so next year will be an experiment. It'll be interesting to see it kind of come together. I have the coolest TA advisor.
No, you don't.
But we want that across the board.
Yeah, but we're like the coolest, and everyone's also
sorry,
cool,
but
but we're the
you're
coolest.
wrong.
Maybe.
A little bit of advisory competition never hurt.
Yes, it's healthy.
Yes.
So that's all I have if you want to pose questions. It was very general, broad strokes there. So yeah, feel free if you have questions.
I just wanted to add to Lucas that this has been great work this year. I think one of the biggest challenges that you and Amy and Shannon have is that there was all this energy around, okay, the house model is going to go online next year, and the advisory was going to get a lot more resource to it. And then when we backed off of that for a year, you're back into another place which is difficult within the contract to really make this meaningful for people like a real prep. And so from a board perspective, I think when we are back in negotiations next year and we're looking at the house model coming on, and we're looking at the teacher workday and the teacher work year, that's going to be an opportunity to really look at the house model, but look at advisory specifically, and how do we really make that important through the contract.
Or at least the flexibility therein to be able to do what it is we all need to do and do it right.
Precisely. This can't happen. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. Teachers can't just create this automatically. Communities take work and preparation to build. We know that. Thank you for bringing that up.
It does seem like it would be a driver for our end statement. You know, that if that's what we're monitoring that ability to lead healthy, productive, successful lives, of knowing how to be in a community and how to be healthy into healthy relationships and be seen and heard. It seems like it is central to that.
And the discussions about engagement.
Another piece in that pie, like you were saying with morning meeting, of just building relationships, cross-cultural relationships. Anyway.
Good. Look forward to more to come.
Yeah.
This is never finished, so.
Never finish. It's frustrating, but it's part of the fun.
I was going to say, that's part of the learning, part of the fun.
Good.
Oh, great, thank you.
Thanks, Lucas.
Thank you.
Get the lights.
Sarah, thank you for coming again.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate that. Okay. Now we move to public comments. We have Nicole and Infinite gonna just here for support?
Yeah, he's
Okay.
just here for support.
All right.
I'm Nicole. I'm a JFK mom and soon to be a middle schooler mom. And I'm with Parents for Youth and Change. And I'm here today just to give a little update about transportation.
Right.
We've been working as a group in the community to get more transportation ideas and get transportation kind of a boost around here. And we have a lot of volunteers that have come forward that have gotten background checks at City Hall, at the police department. And we're looking for more volunteers, so we're trying to put a call out to volunteers to help with carpooling the children to school and going back to building communities. I think the carpooling will help with our building the school communities. And the carpooling also helps get our kids to school for morning meeting, so they can't miss morning meeting due to lack of transportation here to school. So I think that'll be beneficial, and it'll help work with the schedule of morning meetings. And I will leave my contact information if anyone would like to become a volunteer or know someone that would. And we'd like to thank Deke for all of our help with the background checks and making them more accessible to Winooski. And definitely, we also would like to ask the school board maybe if you could work with us on giving rewards and incentives to families that are willing to help volunteer their time to get our children to school. So if we can come up with some type of, it doesn't have to be like extravagant, but at least to say thank you and get more people involved and, kind of building communities.
How's it work?
How does it work?
Yeah. Is it specific spots where people come, or the same families every day, or do people gather in a particular area?
Basically focused on the children that are having the harder time getting to school, which is over by the Chicks Market area,
Yep.
that area over there. But definitely people that you reach out to our group, Parents for Youth and Change, or someone here at the school. If you see me in school, you can contact me. But if you know someone's having a hard time or would like to volunteer getting children to school, we can help arrange rides that way. But we do offer the background check at the police station for you to be a volunteer, so we can make sure we're safe and also know that your kids are getting a safe ride to school. So it's basically outreach and networking with other parents at this point, and contacting Parents for Youth and Change and parents like me, so we can kind of figure out where the need is and also help people meet each other and see what we can do together as a community.
I just wanted to say really quick, it hasn't launched yet.
Okay.
Yeah, we're still working on. Well,
And so we do have a partner in the Winooski Housing Authority
Right.
They're going to help us coordinate the carpool. And we are starting small at the Elm Street apartments. And then
The Elm
we'll
Street
move
apartment.
out from there.
Gotcha.
So we're starting with the harder locations that first, and
Yeah.
then moving it.
Is this for after school also? Is this just for
Just
morning?
for morning, just especially getting the kids to school getting to school safe and on time, and ready to learn, and
So-
going to morning meeting, and being here on time, and so they get breakfast as well.
Well,
So-
it's downhill on the way back. So
Yeah, it's a lot easier getting back, but so small steps. We're working
Part
on
of the
getting
way.
here first,
Part of
and
the way,
then maybe in the future getting back. But
It makes a difference.
makes sense. But yeah.
So it's trying to get enough volunteers with
We're-
enough
we're-
empty
yeah.
seats to get enough
We're-
kids to
we're
school
still
to
looking for
help.
volunteers. We definitely need the support from the community and parents, and we just need a lot of support and a lot of volunteers. So that's why we're coming back to you to ask more for incentives to those families that are helping out.
Yeah. Yeah, we should put
Great.
something about it in
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Who's up next on the newsletter?
You got the. It just went out.
Yeah.
Coming to a theater near you. Okay. So next item here, consent.
I just wrote it. I gotta do it.
Any, I would accept a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
Any comments? I had a couple in here that I'd like to have, if I can, changed or updated. In the section on 7, the governance processes in the minutes. The comment is under discussion and possible action, Act 46, Superintendent McMahon met with other superintendents regarding Act 46, and it makes sense to have Colchester and Winooski merge. I'd like that to say, have a study done about the possible merger of Winooski and Colchester, if we can. And then just below that, in that same, we can work on it after, possible merger. But down just below that is, just below that as well, there is the State Board of Education. At some point, a decision needs to be brought to the State Board of Education by July 17th. It's July of 2017. So that we get that. Yeah, so to get that all closed up. I think that was all I had. Anything else?
I just want to celebrate that the farm to school. Whoop whoop! That is really exciting, especially since it's sort of about the space and construction and vision and curriculum, and I mean there's a lot of depth to this farm to school that I think will be awesome for our school community.
Yes.
School and
Yes.
community, right? What's that? Yeah, it's good the way it is, just a comment on it. Yeah, just a comment on
I'm
it,
just
yeah,
commenting.
nothing.
I want to pull things out because we get to read all this awesome stuff that's happening in schools. I think sometimes it's just good to shout it out too.
All right,
There's a lot of great stuff in there.
I would, anything else? Other comments? All right, I would accept, or, all those in favor accepting the consent with the 2 adjustments noted? Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right. Item 6, governance processes, education. We've been talking about annual education and getting it to the point where we pinpoint our education. As we listen through tonight, and I'll let Sean do the intros here in a second, I'd like you to be thinking about, I'm putting the agenda together for 2017, or starting July through the year, what kind of education that might look like for next year as we go. So you can think about that too. So Sean, I'll turn it over, intros.
All right. So I'm happy to introduce 2 good friends and colleagues of mine. We have Jean Jensen from Williston, and she was the board chairwoman at CVU, and was also, you were the board chair at CSSU too, as well, right? And Bob Mason, who is the Chief of Operations Officer for Chittenden South Supervisory Union, managing many budgets, many service plans, and working with many, many boards. And they come to you with a great deal of experience with school finance. And I'm really happy to see them again and hear what they have to help the board with tonight. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
You betcha.
So my claim to fame is that I became board chair at CVU like within a month of Sean becoming principal at CVU. I just lasted longer than he did.
And we're not at all sad about that.
You know what? We miss him, but it was a great move. It's good to have colleagues around the state. So just before we kind of jump into things here, I just a couple things. One, time check. Like, how much time are you thinking, Mike? Do you want to?
We had an hour in here for you, but if you don't fill it,
No, no.
I'm sure we'll find something to put there. But don't want to hurry you either.
Okay.
We didn't take it personally that like 6 people left the room when the
We had
consent agenda.
we had that discussion already. So yeah.
So the other thing is that if you got the handouts.
Yep.
Yep.
We've got
Okay.
the slides.
So we kind of have a list of topics that we plan to cover.
Okay, gotta put on my glasses.
What's that?
Let's see.
That was it. Yeah.
Slideshow.
Need the forward button.
Far right.
Far right.
Play.
Far right.
This one.
Far top right. Play. There you go.
Oh,
I like that better.
no, I don't like that either. Yeah.
So Bob's not our technology officer. Just
Okay,
not the
Sean,
director
help
of
me.
Technology.
There you go.
Oh, we're good.
Yeah, that's where we started though.
Oh, now you're in
Get to the
screen
next
show.
one.
So.
There we go.
Okay.
I can't take it.
Sorry to get in the way of your success. That isn't the
As
first
usual.
time I've done that.
So you can see the list here that we talked about the topics, and just before we jumped in, we wanted to see, is there any other things that you'd like to talk about, or are there questions that you really want to make sure that you have answered before you leave? My lovely assistant will write them on the pad so we don't forget them.
She's not
I
able
just
to say that.
The only reason I wanted to do the intro was to be able to say that. So.
So these are kind of questions, if you've got something that's in the back of your mind, we're planning to have fun with finance, but it'd be nice to have a little board that has 3 or 4 things on it, and we go back at the end of the night and go, did we cover those?
No.
So are there any questions you already have before we've begun?
I think for me, it has a lot to do with making sure, the reason this financial literacy piece was important to me when we were talking about putting it together for the board is that I want to make sure that I am able to protect the community from, mistakes or abuse in the school. And so I don't know if there's things that you can recommend that we look at closely relative to other things, in the audits or so forth that we need to be looking for. Things that if we see them would be something to check into. I don't know. Yellow
Okay, so
flags, red flags.
So I said, am I fulfilling my responsibilities?
Yeah, but
You're a board member.
right.
Yeah, okay. That's good. Other ones? Takes me a while to spell.
I think maybe a subset of
Math
that
I could do easily.
it may be buried in here, but something to me as simple, and I think it fits under here, is in signing warrants.
Yep.
What again? I think it's back to the same flag. What in there do I look for? Why am I signing it? Obvious. I think that
Because you're reading.
becomes a little obvious, but what are you looking for?
Mm-hmm.
Bob, one of the things that I have noticed since I've been here is there was a big capital reserve that was built up over time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering about both of your experiences around when you do have favorable balances year to year for whatever reasons, how you allocate those monies, how you make those decisions, fund balance versus capital reserve.
Yep.
Versus, do you have time at the end of the fiscal year to make some meaningful purchases, those kinds of things.
Okay. Others? Okay, so when Gene and I get done, I'll walk up to this board and go, check, check, check.
Great.
Maybe.
Maybe. Or oops. So, so we're gonna jump into this. Bob's gonna start. This is how this is gonna work. Bob's the expert. I'm color commentary. But we do want to just remind everybody that, we're not the State Board of Ed. I'm not a lawyer. So if something doesn't sound right, I'm going to tell you how it's worked. I have was on the school board for 13 years. I just finished in March. Finished temporarily.
Oh, I hadn't heard the news.
So I've seen a lot of different things happen and how we react to them. I'm happy to share my experience with that. And if I say something that's really wrong, Bob will just correct me, like that's his job. But,
We do have that relationship in both directions. We're here to share with you how it works in the journey she and I have been together on for close to 13 years. We would like it if you reference us in the future as Gene and Bob shared with us, this is how they do it. And not in the sentence that says Gene and Bob said this is the way to do that. Mm-hmm. We are not your lawyer, your legal counsel, or your auditor. Those people can tell you how to do it. We're just sharing with you what has worked well for us, kind of managing these key questions. The other thing we'd like you to do is stop us at any point in time we've lost you, because we do this day in, day out, 13 years in a row with 7 schools. So we'd like you to stay connected from the beginning to the end. So
and just ask questions as we go.
Yes.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. Yep. So the first thing we're going to start on is the fund structure. There seem to be some questions about
upper right.
Upper right.
Hey. Upper right on the pad, Sean, before he screws it up again.
Try the clicker.
Oh.
Oh. This button up here?
Mm-hmm. The right-sided one.
We don't have these fancy technology things at CSSU.
No. I pressed every button on here.
You're stuck.
Come on. Why did it?
Always comes down to the technology.
There you go. There you go.
Okay.
Oh, what was it before you forget?
What was the slide before?
No, what was the button you
I just put the arrow. You see that arrow right there? I put it on the slide somewhere and then I hit it. Okay. We've been trained. Okay, so I'm going to, you had a lot of questions about movement of money from funds into reserves, what to do with fund balances. I thought first I'd start with a slide of the obligated structure we have with funds. As you walk into a school for the first time or a school board, you all of a sudden find out there's money in different accounts. There's 4 columns on your audit that says money sorted into multiple places. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I'm going to outline for you quickly what those funds are. The general fund is where the preponderance of money that operates your school, supports your kids, lands. It's what you vote as residents as a budget at the beginning of the year. When you walk in to approve the budget, you're improving the general fund amount that taxpayers are going to allow you to spend. Generally, all the money to operate a school should be in the general fund, unless there's a particular reason for it not to be. So very often when we go into schools after 2 or 3 years, we find somebody's decided to start a program by using money from somewhere else, and now it's part of what we offer kids every year, year in, year out. It needs to move into the general fund, the expenditures, if in fact they're in support of your kids. With the following exceptions, you have grants, federal grants coming into your school. You have a large sum of those, very complex. They operate separate from your general fund. You have different obligations as to how you have to spend them, how you have to comply with them, and what you can do if you're lucky enough to have leftover money. So we keep those separate. We keep your food service fund separate. I believe because someone 100 years ago thought food service funds should operate independently of the school. Everything you need to take care of children should be paid either by the government or by the fees you charge per meal. That isn't necessarily the case these days. I don't know how well you're doing here with your food service operation.
So we're a bit different than Chittenden South in that way, in that we contract with the Abbey Group.
Yep.
And basically the contract with them says that you know, they have to break even or they make some profit, and if they don't, tough noogies.
Oh,
And
so
we
it's
pay them
all- the
we
risk
pay
is
them
all
a
on their
flat
side.
fee, right?
And you're free and reduced population, is it?
We're the community eligibility provision, so we feed all students for free all meals. Yeah.
Yes. Very nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not quite all of us are there. The next one, well, we've done food service fund. The fourth one is a capital fund. Very often schools create some sort of capital reserve fund or a SURF fund, or they have some cute name for it, but it's a fund approved by the board or approved by the electorate to take money from a variety of sources and use it for the long-term needs of the facility. And we're going to talk a little bit how it's kind of best practices and how to use the capital fund, your operations and maintenance budgets line that are in the general fund, and a couple of other things to support the long-term needs of your school. There are other enterprise funds. Typically, it's activities that are arm's length away from the operation of the school. They receive revenue and support from different directions than the school generally does, and there's some sense that they're going to operate autonomous from the school. I used our Imagine After School program. We have an individual running a program in support of kids who need to stay at school a little longer than the normal school day. And they pay for that additional after-school activity. So he sort of manages all the inflows and the expenses outside of what the school board's responsible for.
But you're not spending anything out of the general fund in that particular
We
endeavor.
are-
It all stays within that one fund.
Right. Same thing, the food service is an enterprise fund, if you will, too. It's independent or arm's length from the school. It's intended to operate independently. And any support boards give to food service the only thing that'll show up on the general fund is that contribution they make. So say, for example, Shelburne Community School decides they need to year in, year out put $20,000 into the food service operation. That's the only entry that'll show up on the general fund. The food service inflows and outflows in general will be in a separate fund. Okay, so those are enterprise funds. And then lastly, we have a number of different fiduciary funds, money the school manages, but manages for the benefit of someone other than the school. Two best examples are student activity accounts, typically by class in the high school. Those are student funds, and we're taking care of the bookkeeping, if you will, to kind of keep an eye on it. And then I listed private purpose trust funds. Again, at the high school, we've got a number of contributions that have been made in the past that support, say, scholarships. We hold that money for the benefit of someone else and manage the process.
We had a few cases, I think it was a parent-run activities using, going through somehow through the school. They ended up having to get special tax.
They had to get their own tax ID number so that they
Right,
could.
and not
Our
through-
treasurer
but I think
at
that's-
that time deemed that it was not within the regulations for them to operate using the school tax ID number, that they needed to get their own.
I can picture that conversation. We've tried to work with each of the parent-teacher organizations by whatever name they go as, having a separate tax ID and not using the school's tax ID to on their own go open an account in Merchants Bank or in People's, so that we have total control over the school's Fed tax ID. And it's best that they have their own tax ID, given the nature of the work that they do and the independence from the school. On the other hand, we very often accept donations from concerned or willing residents of the community in support of our schools. We call, like donations, we will write a tax letter that says, you can, in essence, it's a little more polished than this, but it says you can use this on your income tax return to claim a deduction for this amount. So we have both those variants.
Those fiduciary funds are an inordinate headache. I mean, compared to all the money, they have a small amount of money, they're a terrible headache to manage because you've got other parents involved in fundraising and spending, and are they doing it to support something you approve of, but it's sort of different, and it's they leave the money, the thing ends, and you've got this money. They're a terrible headache, but hey, people are raising money for the kids, so the support.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we grabbed a hold of it and said we need to have a process to manage it, because 10 years ago there was money that had come into the school in a variety of different places, in a variety of different drawers, and many people had no idea why it was there. You know, we still have this account. Anybody got any idea what it was supposed to be used for? So now we've gathered all that together, said you need to start the process before you take any money, with telling us why you're gathering money, for what purpose, and who's responsible. So in 4 years, any one of us could go out and say, we know why that's there.
And that's done right through the business office, not.
It's done all by the business office. It's done by, in our structure, it's done by the supervisory union in support of all 5 schools. So those are funds.
It's accurate to say that auditors like those funds to come in and then go out within the same fiscal year in student activities?
Yes. Yeah, they don't like money to linger too
Right.
long. And they don't like money that no one can tell them why it's there,
Yeah.
or when it will be disposed of or spent. And on auditors, generally, the last slide is auditors, but auditors will start with general funds and make sure that you're not doing anything that needs their recommendation in the general fund side, and then they'll work their way down. Because in a school, that's the money gets smaller as you work down the list. Let's see if Okay, so you wanted to know our insight on fund balances. Say you've got money left over. We're gonna go through a quick summary of the rules of the road, if you will, in each category. So in the general fund, there is a lot of structure, a lot of statute that says if you end the year with money, they tell you exactly what to do with it. So the general fund ends up with a favorable balance. We call that the fund balance at the end of the year. You're obligated by statute to have voters approve the disposition of your fund balance every year. If you fail to do that, it's intended that that entire fund balance goes to offset taxes in the next year. So it would show up on the next year's budget as cash carryover or applied fund balance, some terminology
It's
like
the first
that.
line on your revenue sheet.
Yeah.
On your FMI.
So we in CSSU annually disposition that entire amount typically into 3 areas. We either call it revenue for the next year. Jean's used that in the building of her budget for the next year. Or we allocate a portion of it to an existing reserve or construction account for a specific purpose. So the next article may say we want to use $100,000 of available fund balance for purposes of renovations of the auditorium. So it has to be by dollar and specific by project. And then the third is you can take the remainder that's left over after doing those two and put it into a reserve for future years. And that allows us to roll in front of us a pool of money to help as the years progress. So this year, with the tax burdens we all had with Act 46, it was nice to have some fund balance to have as part of that conversation. It was tough for schools that had none. So that's on the general fund. We good? We
Before I
good sort
jump
of on
into my
that?
color commentary.
Yes.
So, we have this discussion all the time on the general fund and how much it's appropriate to keep versus, if you think about it, the reason there's money in your general fund is because you have overtaxed your community. You could look at it that way. You brought more money in as tax money than you spent. And so the right thing to do is to give it back to the community. That's why I always start with that premise. But there are other reasons you need some money for different reasons, for an emergency or for, I don't know how, well, anyways, basically there's 2 reasons that you need it: for some unknown expense that you didn't budget for that you have to cover. And the other thing is this line that you put in for revenue this year. If you don't put it in again next year, you're starting in a hole, right? You're kind of assuming revenue that's coming out of your general fund. If that number's 0 the next year, the whole delta is a budget problem for you, a tax problem. Right. So there's 2 things that I would always do. One is you should figure out what, with your auditor's help, figure out what a reasonable reserve, or I can use the term reserve, the capital, how much you should have in your emergency fund. Let's call it your emergency fund. It's going to be different by school. CVU's a $20 million budget each year. We have our number's $300,000. Because you think about it, once you get your staff in place, there aren't a whole lot of big ticket things that you're going to keep money for. So we always say 300, 350 we want to have in that. So we try never to draw our general fund balance down below that number. And then you have to look and say, well, how much did I apply last year that I'm going to have to apply next year? I need to step that down. I can't just go from 200,000 to zero. That's too much to cover in a budget year. So I want to keep a little bit more because I know next year I'm going to have to apply a little bit more. So you put those two things and you say, okay, that's my target number. In my opinion, that's, at that point, you look at the balance and you say, we've always done CVU, usually, is take that and put it in our the difference and put it in our capital fund. As Bob said, a specific thing that we know we're going to need to do the building. So if you could give it back to the taxpayers directly, it's going to give you a budget problem next year. You kind of give it to them indirectly by putting it in your capital fund, earmarked, so you don't have to go bond for something in a couple of years. But that's my advice. Find out how much you really need for your emergency fund and try to do something constructive with the rest of it.
So the emergency fund is kind of, you're doing a little bit of risk management. How much financial risk do you have in the next year, given this is your budget and this is the variability that you might experience, and how would you cover it? So at a school that goes directly to taxpayers for support, or to the state ed fund for support, it gets dicey to get more money mid-year because your enrollment's changed, children with special needs have changed, the boiler died, you have a mold problem you didn't know in half the building. So for an operating school, there's a need for $300,000. You really don't want to face the pain of trying to find money again from the state or from local lenders. But on the other side, we have a supervisory union that raises money by assessing its member schools. So bad things happen at the SU, we just inform our schools, like Gene, that we've adjusted the assessments. To cover our expenses, we're going to do a mid-year assessment. So the SU doesn't need to cover or have a large fund balance, generally, because it has a technique with which to deal with risk. So keep the risk management thing in mind as you play with some of these numbers. I think Gene is exactly right. The keys are have enough that it's matched up to what risk you've got, and then have enough that you can repeat next year what you use the current year, or else it's going to feel like a budget challenge the same way an expense increase would
Because
feel.
frankly, if someone in your community looks at your financial report and says, why do you have $1 million in your general fund? Give it back to us. You have to have an answer to that. You know.
We did get a percentage of, someone gave us advice on that to make sure we're staying within.
Right, the auditor.
Yeah, the auditor, gave us that ballpark.
Yeah.
But sorry, we're talking about two different things, right? One is the capital fund, which I think I get, which is at the end of the year, I have $10 left over and I'm going to save it for when I need to buy a new boiler, which I know is coming 5 years down the road, right? But the emergency piece is, you're saying add in a little cushion into your general fund budget should something change significantly in your population.
Well, actually,
Great
I
question.
wasn't talking about capital funds.
Yeah.
Hadn't gotten
We
capital.
really hadn't gone that far. All we're talking about is fund balance. You finished the year, the auditor says there's $342,000 left in fund balance. That's the conversation we're talking about. And one of the uses of that might be to go to a construction fund for a contribution.
Okay.
So it's how to feed the construction fund. A construction fund and a reserve are very different than a fund balance. A fund balance is a mathematical number the auditor gives you every July 1st.
When you say construction fund, are you talking about capital, like the capital fund?
You might call yours, I think we saw something that says a capital reserve fund.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking
Okay.
about, as a construction
Okay.
fund, or they
where
go
you
by
call
a
it.
number of different names.
So let me check in here then. On our budget, we don't have that emergency
We
fund
don't have
piece.
the general
Right.
fund balance that we're targeting to be other than zero when we put the budget together, right?
And anything that we do have, we just kick into the capital fund.
If we have
That's what
one,
happened
You
in the
have a
past.
favorable
Yeah.
balance.
we've rolled it over a couple of times, back into the following years, which I think Gene was talking about.
Yeah.
Take $100,000 and put it into next year's general fund as a baseline. The
But we
problem
haven't
with
done
that,
We put it in the capital fund, haven't we?
we put part of it into the capital reserve, but we have rolled 100,000 back into the budget for the following year.
Right.
As a starting point. The problem, like Gene mentioned, is that if you put for some reason you have 250,000 left over and you put it in, and then the following year you have zero.
Yeah.
You've got that 250 that you've got to cover the activities you were using it for.
Right.
You got to cover those activities, and you've got nothing to roll over, so it's got to go all back into
Tax
tax
goes up.
revenue.
Right.
So that's why I've always advocated with being careful about how much you roll over.
Yeah.
If you can't continue to support it, you're going to have to support it.
Right.
You're going to be forced to at some
You should
point.
never put that number on your revenue for your budget unless you have a plan for the next year.
Right.
Right.
It's really risky.
And our fund balance currently is around 100,000.
Okay.
Fund
What what like the predicted fund balance for the end of the year? That's what you think is gonna be left
No,
over?
from last year.
Oh, from last year.
Yeah.
With the favorable,
Well, that
Balance,
was
is that the same?
not just all of that from last year, but ongoing.
Yeah, fund balance
So
is
that-
a known number. It's established every July 1st. It's collectively what's money's left over in the general fund after all revenue has been received
Right.
in the final prior year and all expenses have been paid. So it's a fixed number.
Okay.
And your auditor tells you what
Well,
that number is.
it's not a fixed number, it is what is left, and you know it for sure on
yes.
July 1st.
It's a
Like your
known
checking
a
account
known
at the end of
number.
the year.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
It's like whatever's it's your checking account balance at the end of the year. Hey, you
Yeah.
got money left over. This is great.
But so you're allowed to roll that over though.
Okay, let me do this one again.
Yeah.
The number is known, say it's $120,000, you're obligated to go to voters and disposition that.
And say-
Boards cannot look at that and go, I'm going to spend 20 of that on
Yeah,
this, or I'm
right.
gonna spend,
Right.
that's not by law, it requires, it all goes to revenue is in support of the school in the following year, unless your electorate is approved to do something different.
and when we did that, we put it on the ballot,
Correct.
right?
Right.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
talked about, yeah.
Now, the other thing that feeds all of this is a general operations perspective on what you want to be doing with budgets. Gene and I might disagree a little bit on this, but
Oh, good.
I think
seen
in
this
Gene's
before, it's
ideal
fun.
world, you would
Sean and I used to
budget,
disagree
spend
on this.
exactly what's budgeted, and then and that's a good budget when you and to have some left over or too much left over implies you aren't doing effective budgeting. Your likelihood of possibilities is on a bell curve. In our systems, we generally want to be even or have a little bit of surplus. We don't like running deficits. And so if you're on that side of the bell curve, you're going to accumulate money in a fund balance account over time. So that's where we'd like to have your budget process work. Cover all the risks you know of and then a little more so that you're landing in the right part of the experience curve. So we've done just general fund balance.
The rest of them are easy though.
Okay. The next one is grants. Say you finish your Title II grant for the year and you have a little bit of money left over. Your grant will specifically tell you what to do with that, whether it rolls over into your next grant year or what obligations you have to do that. Respect grants. You don't need to get voter approval, and it's not necessarily your money free and clear. Food service money, anything that's, huh?
They don't have.
We don't have to do it.
You just get that.
Well, you pay Abby. Or they all, the federal funds go directly to them?
Yeah, oh yeah, they handle all of it. We just pay them a management fee. That's it.
That-
Done.
No, you get two more on this page.
Check.
Yeah.
That check. We may be back, but
okay.
right now it's covered.
Glad it's working for you.
That's a whole other hour to itself.
Yeah. Capital funds, any surplus rolls forward into the next year. Capital fund money doesn't disappear at the end of the calendar year. So very often, if you're running projects over the course of 1, 2, or 3 years, the capital fund structure is the right place to be because the money doesn't go to someone else on July 1st. Other enterprise funds also stay separate and balances roll forward year to year, and the same thing with fiduciary funds. Sean has already mentioned that auditors generally don't like you to carry a whole lot of money in fiduciary funds year after year after year with no one really using the money. But so that's how fund balances are. Have we covered fund balances?
Done with the funds.
Done with the funds. Let's do
fun and
financial
fun.
management review.
We ready to move on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You do this one, I'll do it.
Oh, okay. So in CSSU, we have a process, what we call financial management review. I believe you have something similar here already in place. It happens monthly. On a monthly basis, administrators and the finance and human resources team all get together, discuss what happened 30 days looking out the back window. What did we all do to ourselves for 30 days financially? Do we all understand all those events? And then what would we collectively kind of anticipate it's going to land like at the end of the year? The board's responsibility is to have confidence that the people managing the resources in the schools know what they're doing and aren't surprising you. It's not necessarily that you should get in the middle of that level of detail, but you need to walk away with every monthly transaction feeling like we've got the funds in good hands. So that's what happens monthly within the group. Monthly, the board does director's orders or warrants. I'm not sure what the process here is, but by law, the board needs to approve all financial disbursements from the school on a monthly basis. You may be doing that approval after checks are actually issued. That's allowed, but the board needs to say okey dokey on some document. I think you call those warrants here. They come to the board for final approval as part of an agenda.
We need one to sign to do original. We need
Yes.
one signature to start the process. And then
Same thing we do in our schools. The clerk of the board or the assistant clerk is typically the individual that sits in the business office sometime prior to the board meeting and reviews the box full of requisitions, purchase orders, and checks to be printed or checks that have been printed. It is not that person's responsibility to look through them and go, oh, Gene, I think we could have done better with this one if we had bought it from Staples rather than where you bought it from, or I don't believe Sean really should have bought this. I don't see how it's connected to the school. That kind of activity is not what you're asked to do. You're really asked to confirm the process by which you set that requisitions would be made, purchases could be committed to, checks could be written in support of something that was delivered. You're looking to check to see that process appears to have been followed. So generally the process is a requisition requires a signature at some level of your organization or a purchase order. You don't write a check unless you have a purchase order and a requisition that matches a receipt of material or receipt of services, and the numbers better match up. I think as every board member, if you're looking at that the first few times you're serving in that capacity, it's acceptable to go, I have no idea why we're buying this in support of the school. Or, Bob, this amount seems to be immense. Do we always spend this much on this activity? Because as a board member, the first time you see everything that's spent, it's kind of eye-opening. Frightening. So you can push on, my advice to you as board members would be push on the financial office so you're comfortable with knowing what it is and you're comfortable from what you can see confirming that the process has been followed.
This is the clerk's role.
Yeah, this is the clerk role.
Having looked through those, as much as, it's not discernible right away. You know, to me, it feels like we look through the budget, we go through it, it gets approved, and then we get these monthly warrants to sign. It's really hard to discern the detail behind, you know, what's going on. And I don't feel like that's my job to question that because we've already approved the budget and the spending. And then for the means piece, that's their job to make sure, like this 30-day check and review. So I still get a little perplexed as to what am I looking for? You know, is it just something that is odd, that I would perceive as odd?
You the clerk, Tori?
No, but we do sign, we need 3 signatures on them, 2 to 3 signatures,
original
so
and
we
then
do
2.
sign.
Is
But
this
again,
a file thing? So you can see what they're.
yeah.
What?
But you gotta stop that.
Oh, this is the cover page.
Yeah, there's some detail there.
Yeah, so there is the detail, and
Broken out
yet,
by,
you know, in terms of matching it to the huge overall budget, it's sort of like,
How about a off-the-cuff training session? Would that work?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a record of every purchase order?
Yeah.
If I was in your shoes, I'd make
Yeah.
sure that, particularly the the larger dollar value items, they make sense to you.
Okay.
Or are reasonable for your understanding of the system. And then the
operations.
next thing I would do is with Rebecca, right? Whoever you're sitting with
Yeah.
Rebecca. I'd say, Rebecca, I'd like to see the purchase order file. That one. And then
This
you.
is the clerk though, again though, Bob. These guys all see this, right? Are you saying
Yeah,
we should
they
all
all
be
see
asking
it.
Rebecca? Or
Oh, everybody gets this whole document?
Well, no, 3 people have to sign it,
3 of us will sign it.
ultimately.
Or there's
What
no
we do
check.
is we have one, correct me if I'm
Oh.
wrong, Bob, we have the clerk who sits down
Right.
with the bookkeeper and goes through every single one to make
Not doing
sure.
it. That's Mike's job. He's the chair.
Hey, you're the clerk, come on.
We're designating the chair
Okay,
to
so-
be that designee.
And so then when, we only get the top sheet at the board,
Yeah.
because we know the clerk's done it.
This goes to the board.
Oh.
So that,
This
see,
goes
that
to the
makes more
board
sense,
every
because I know
month
he
in the
reads
consent
it.
And
agenda.
at that point, the clerk has already gone through and spot checked.
Typically,
Yes.
somebody says.
That makes way more sense.
A board
Now I'm
member
more
could at
confident
that point in time
signing
say, has Jean, the clerk, reviewed these? And the answer would be yes.
Yeah.
And then the board adopts it, sort of on the comfort of that process having been done. But what I was talking about, if you're the clerk or the person who's looking at it,
Mike.
I would, to gain comfort,
Yeah.
I'd
Right.
identify some items, and then when you get the purchase order folder, you want to confirm that whoever started the process with a requisition.
And that's what's in the backup and the folders behind it.
Yeah,
So
had the proper signature, was the
Yeah.
right person who could do that. It wasn't your second shift custodian who has decided to buy a new 48-inch color TV for somewhere. And that, though, when the check was printed, it actually matches what the requisition had,
Gotcha.
okay?
That's
Okay.
helpful.
And that somebody in authority approved the payment of the check.
Right.
And that person probably was responsible for making sure that before the check went out, there was a purchase order, there was a receipt. And if it's for services, somebody should have signed it and said, yes, we got those services on such and such a date. So that's kind of the process that I'd have you focus on. By all means, the first time through, there's a number of these in here that you'll go, what? Why would we write a check as the Winooski School District to such and such? It's reasonable for you to look at the purchase order folder and be a little bit, and ask a little bit of your
Being
business manager.
curious.
Yeah.
Generally, it's attitude that works well, so if you approach Rebecca or I with, why did you do this?
Yeah. You like that.
Generally,
That's nice.
So one of the things, Bob, what we have moved toward.
I don't want to hang on to those.
Yeah, take those. These were not being really done on a schedule, like a regular schedule. It was kind of like when they got done and there was a call or they were brought to a board member and and so we've systematized that.
That's
but
great.
It's still weekly. Do you think that we could push that to it being a monthly function?
Yes, but there's I think a few process steps. You as a board need to be comfortable with checks leaving the system that you physically haven't signed the warrants.
Yeah.
Okay, we're okay with that on our system because all of our clerks are comfortable that they've done it enough that they're not going to find something that they go, I wish we hadn't printed that check.
So are the clerks checking it weekly and then it's coming to the full board monthly?
When I did it, I was only checking it monthly.
Because I know Jonathan used to come in, right? I mean, he was there.
You probably had a lot more.
How often?
I was doing it for CSSU.
I think he was there
Right.
weekly.
Typically, in our house, the clerk needs to approve them before they're issued as payments.
Right.
Okay. But we then don't wait for the board to approve the warrants to send the payments to vendors. So I think there's something, you could work with that process such that you could keep things moving on the side that it needs to move it's generally every 2 weeks checks need to be printed. That they were moving out of the system and paying your vendors. And then the board process could be monthly, kind of catching up with it.
We were joking at the beginning that when you come on, you're new to the board. it's kind of a hazing thing, I guess. But they always tell the new board member, "Oh, the new board member's always the clerk."
The new
It's
clerk,
nothing
yeah.
to do.
Right.
And, it's only until you got to the next year, and it was like, "How come they're not the clerk?" We just made that up. We wanted you to be
Right.
clerk. So, but it's actually a really good learning experience. I would say it's a lot better for one person, even if you rotate it. If you have one person to do a really good job, than 3 people to do not such a good job.
Yeah.
Because it is fascinating to, and it makes you a lot more comfortable with the controls.
Yeah.
Was what you were asking at
Yeah.
the beginning.
Right.
When you actually see there and you flip through, okay, here's the signature, here's the receipt, here's the invoice, here's the thing that said we got the services
Yeah.
for $250. You know, it makes you a lot more comfortable that there's controls in the system.
Right, excellent.
Mike, what do you think about the monthly thing?
I think getting into a routine where we understand what it is, I think right now it's ad hoc and needs
Yeah.
to be tightened up, so I
Yeah.
don't mind taking the time to try to put a process together that
Right.
is simple but effective,
Right. And consistent.
that we can all follow.
Right. Whatever the period, as long as
And
it's consistent.
I don't see any reason why the second and third signatures can't be done at the board meetings
Right.
once a month, collected and,
Because that's really just for filing purposes anyways, isn't
Right.
it?
right.
Yeah, and the other technique we use to help the business office is there's usually, for most of the boards, a clerk and an assistant clerk, so that she or I or whoever has 2 names to call to get these bills processed. Because you're all very busy. This might not be the right week for you to have an hour to come in and see Rebecca, so that also works well in our. It's also a way to get 2 people understanding the process.
Yeah.
So that when your clerk moves away, you aren't starting at the beginning.
Yep.
Okay, on warrants,
Yes.
director's
Yeah,
orders.
Well,
that
I
was
think
illuminating.
opens
Yeah.
up more questions than
Yeah.
answers, but it gives more
No,
detail
but it
than
gives
we
us a
had,
starting
so-
place,
Okay.
right? It
Yep.
gives us a starting place, yeah.
The last piece I had on this one is what happens quarterly with the financial management review, and I think you're doing that as well. The FMR comes to the board.
Quarterly review.
Quarterly, the board's responsibility is
Well,
to
that's what I'm going to talk about on the next slide.
see. Drum roll, please. Do you want me to move the
Yes.
slides forward?
So, some of this may be, Finance 101, and I apologize for that if you're all moved beyond that, but I'll just go kind of quickly through it. Okay, maybe I won't. So just to start on a couple, one really fundamental question, and it took me several years on the board, maybe 5 or 6 years on the board before I could really answer this question. Why does the board even review the financial management report? What's the role of the board? You get this big sheet of seniors, you're looking at a lot of numbers, there's pluses and minuses, there's revenue, and I know a lot of people on my board just look at the bottom and go, we're 50,000 to the good, done, next item.
Right. But have we been moving fund balances around to try to keep up with them?
Well, I mean, on this one, it's just gonna be strictly your spending and your revenue, it's all actual, things going on, but that's,
Are we on track?
it's kind of gets to, the thing to keep in mind is the budget, when it's approved by the community, the budget, the community votes, they just approve the bottom line number of your budget. So they don't say you have this much to spend on salaries and this much to spend on whatever. They say we approve $10 million, your budget is. And so you could say the board's saying, well, as long as that number's good, we'll move on. The other thing a lot of people use it incorrectly for is to say, are we in control, right? So you're looking down going, oh, we're $300 over. And this line item, Bob, can you explain that?
She does do that.
I do. But after the first 6 years of accusatory tone, I've morphed into, can you help me explain this? Because really to me, the reason that that the board should spend time on the FMR is it's what the M is for. It's a management tool. It's for managing your system. If you're an accountant, there's like accounting reports and there's management reports. And this is really to look at the health of your school, trends, and other things we're going to talk about in a minute. But it's not a control thing. You're not quizzing because you think someone's stealing money. You're probably not going to find that on your FMR unless they're really stealing big time. And it's not to make sure that you don't spend if you're spending too much on gas versus chalkboards, that's not the purpose of it either. It's really to understand what's going on in your school better and to help the board make decisions. So the next one is board philosophy. This is just kind of a question for you before I go somewhere that you're not there. The question is, what's your board's philosophy on allowing administrative financial flexibility? Like, are you okay with the administration spending more on one line item or another, or do you try to hold them to I know you're going to policy governance, but I just didn't know how you guys feel about that.
We are in
We are
policy
in
governance.
policy
Yeah.
governance,
And
and we're
means.
pretty flexible. Yeah, it's
Pretty
a
flexible?
means.
Ends up being a means if,
It's their decision.
That's good. That's good.
They know what they need, we don't.
Because it's definitely a bit of a philosophy, because I know for CVU, we will agonize over the budget by line item, right? And the feeling, and then that's what we present to the community. And so there is a feeling that you should respect that decision. In fact, we got ourselves in, might have been right after you left, Sean, but we had Sean, it's amazing we're friends. We had some real knockdown dragouts on the budget. So Bob would just hide under the table. Tell me when you're done.
Yeah.
And we had a very tough budget year. We ended up having to take out like 2 half-time positions to get the budget passed, to get the board to approve. I shouldn't say that because it probably would have passed anyway, but to get the board to approve the budget, we had some real brutal discussions, and the budget passed. And as it came to the end of the year, and Sean is looking to staff, he says, look at the data. Some assumptions we made in the budget were too pessimistic. We're really going to be in good shape this year, and we're going to be in good shape next year. I'd like to add those positions back in. Still the same bottom line number. You can't go over that number that you've told the community, but the board had these discussions about those positions. And we had some discussions around that, and eventually the board decided to go ahead and put those positions back in. But it was sort of an interesting discussion on, your philosophy around line item budgeting. But I think you're, go ahead, Tori.
I was just thinking, it reminds me of roles and responsibilities. Like, I feel like through policy governance, it doesn't seem like it's our responsibility to get to that level of detail. When we've sort of set the vision of like what our ends are, and the administration gets to discern how they're gonna use the funds
Right.
to make the best decisions for our kids.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but it does change a little bit in a tough budget year. I mean, that's when you really put that to the test. Like this year, right? We were
Yeah,
looking
we're
at
much closer to neutral
Right.
than we have been in the past.
But wasn't it also up to you guys to tell us where you felt like the cuts would make the most, keep it away from the kids, and then it was our decision to make sure, and we were actually, some of the things that came to us is like, we're cutting this out, we're like, what?
I don't like that. Yeah, right.
It's like,
Exactly.
wait, that's
this
not
is
too close.
even one
Yeah.
step beyond that, though. This is 6 months into the year. You're starting to find yourself to be off balance to the line items that you had. Are we okay at that point having Sean move something out of, pick them extracurricular to put him into, I don't know, the special ed fund or something? Just
Right.
to move those line item things around to keep things running. And I guess my thought is, if it's in there in total, but it's mismatched to the way you budgeted it, there's no sense in shutting something down just because you're holding to, you put it in there, you gotta spend it in there, you can't move it. It just doesn't seem.
Doesn't that happen anyways?
I think there's
You
two.
guys move things around during the budget process
Right.
that we see that.
During the
During.
year process.
Yeah,
Right,
you'll
during.
see that
Yeah.
during.
And my question is,
during the year.
would you come to us to need to switch things around? Like, is it our job to,
I think he's informed. I think
I mean,
in
we-
the past we've been informed. Like I remember
But we wouldn't
a
have-
couple of years ago we had a behavioral interventionist.
Intervention.
in the middle of the year, yeah.
In the middle of the year.
yeah,
And some funds were moved around in order to afford that.
right.
So that's.
And
we
that
didn't
was
necessarily approve
CFP
that.
funds, so that was
That
out of the
was
operating.
Right.
More of just
But that's the,
letting us know.
Yeah.
and that's a part of the policy, like, what have we spoken to in policy about that, is you would communicate with us about
Right,
those shifts so that we're not unaware,
right.
and then our system's not left vulnerable.
There's a lot of language in executive limitations and policy governance board policies that say the superintendent may not and it's all covered in those financial policies about overrunning, about transfer of
Basically, he
funds,
just
and
can't
so
break the law.
forth. Yeah, and what you need permission to do and what you don't.
Right.
Okay, well, I mean, if you're going there, you're ahead of us anyways. I think you kind of settled on where we ended up at CVU and CSSU is definitely trust our administrators to do the right thing, but it's nice to be informed so that we're not surprised.
Right.
But what that comes down to is when you get to sitting at the FMR review and you're looking at pluses and minuses, you have to realize that some of those pluses and minuses may have been decisions that Sean made that were just small or principals made, someone made, and so, you know, to go down every single, doesn't seem like this is the board that would do this, but to go through every little line item and say, why is this over $1,000? Why is this over $2,000? It's, yeah, it's, your answer may be because that's something I chose to do, you know, so it's,
Well, and I think that's where the quarterly FMR and the memo is so important, because we've done the same thing that you do, which is, you know, here's the favorable balances, the unfavorable balances, the shifts, the variances that have happened, and then here's the bottom line, here's how it's changed from quarter to quarter. So you can see the shifts. So for example, you've seen in those first couple of quarter FMRs, the shift in special education, because we've had a number of students who have either moved in with needs or that we have placed in more restrictive environments that cost more. So you're seeing, you know, an overrun in special ed that's being countered by underruns in some other areas. And that's the kind of the juggling that we've had to do this year, which gets us to a much smaller favorable balance at the moment and projection for the end of the year than we had in prior years.
And that seems to always be the big swinger in the special ed piece, because
Right.
4 out of the last 5 years, we've carried $100,000, but that's
Right.
only because it just happened not to, you know, we didn't happen to spend what we had budgeted, and you budget in October the previous year for what you think may happen the following year in a very volatile segment of your budget.
Yeah.
And we have a higher incidence of students identified, which results in a higher percentage of your budget being dedicated to that.
And we have a higher percentage of people
Potential.
moving in and out.
Correct.
33% of the population is constantly moving.
So summarizing your conversations, you're gonna focus on the lower
Insane.
right-hand corner, the net amount. You're gonna have Sean make sure he gives you a comfort, he understands what he's done with your money looking out the back window. And that he can accurately forecast what the outcome is likely for you as a board at the end of the year. And you'll develop that over time. And you're gonna allow him the flexibility to move resources as he needs to. And if Sean comes to you and you're underspending markedly year or month after month after month, you all are gonna take notes on that, because that probably implies the budgeting process that he walked through with you the prior year has some needs for improvement. And if you're unfortunately in a deficit and a forecasted deficit, he's got a plan in front of you as to how he and his team are going to deal with that deficit. So that's kind of your responsibilities in looking at it, and how you hand it back to Sean to manage. Okay?
the only thing I would add, because Bob just covered most of them, so the big question, are we on track? If we're gonna run under, what can we do if we're gonna run over, what can we do to mitigate that? If we're gonna run under, are there any actions we wanna take? Because it could be, I can tell you that, last year we did we went to a one-to-one computing, and when the budget, so we're looking at the budget in February, and Jeff is saying, well, the first year it's gonna cost us, we have this big bubble, well, not big bubble, we have a bubble, but then after that it's gonna be lower, and I'm sitting there going, yeah, I'm gonna stand up in front of the town of Williston and say, trust me, it's 50,000 this year, but then it's going down to 30. You know, that would never sell. So since we were running a very favorable budget surplus that year, not surplus isn't the words you like to use. Right?
Favorable balance.
I noticed the language around that. That was great. It's like,
With a favorable balance that year, we just chose to buy the first 20,000 before July 1st, so then we could just present to the voters a flat, 30,000 a year, which is easier for them to understand, and it just use the money that was in there. So as long as you're not going over the budget that you've presented to the community, you can make those kind of decisions. the other normal one we do almost every year is if there's any money left over, we use it for facilities maintenance. There's always something that could be done in the building, and it's not repeatable. You're not tying yourself in. So you couldn't just run out and hire somebody, because then you got to pay for them next year, and they're not in your budget. So those two things.
So you have that flexibility as you, depending on how early you see it coming, you have that
And how firm
flexibility
it
to
is.
do what you need.
Usually we would hold off any extra spending until, the students left the school on June 15th, just to make sure that no special ed kids were showing up.
Yeah.
Yeah, typically, we have a third week of June business meeting for all of our boards, and at that meeting, they might do some of these decisions. Or they might start the computer one, we might start having that conversation with the board in April, given the forecasted health of their year.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's kind of the big question, and delving into the details, we kind of touched on them. Is this material? Is this, you look at it, is it bug dust? Is it really small? It's a bigger number, but it's a small percentage of the bucket that you're looking at, so, that's okay. Is it a really unusual miss? If I see a miss in something like debt service, which you should know exactly, then you might ask a question there. The office of the superintendent, that goes too high, you might ask a question there. But in general, those are the things, and I just go through, I just look at them, I circle all the ones that look big as a number or big as a percentage. And then, so that's just the one thing, just to double check, because you should be able to explain why you're off your budget. You don't have to go into deep detail, but you should be able to explain. Do you understand why the business manager is forecasting something different from the budget? So we all know we're not really looking at actuals, because there's contracts that are signed, there's money to be spent between now and the end of the year. I always look at the end of the year thing. That's what where's the business manager think I'm going to be at the end of the year versus the budget? That's what I focus on. Do I understand why? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong, but I was just looking through your FMR, and there's a couple of places where you spend a very small amount, but there's a big forecasted number to be spent between now and the end of the year. Like that would just be like, okay, well, that's probably right, but I would probably ask a question, is that something I know about, or is that just, we don't know, so we just plugged in the budget for the rest of the year? So those are the kind of things, and you want to know that so that you know, you're testing whether you have an accurate year-end forecast, so you can make the other decisions. Why are we surprised, and how do we keep from being surprised again? And I don't mean surprised like, oops, the price of oil went up or down, but we have issues. We have kids tuition into schools, and if there's really no reason why that should be a huge surprise. I say so. Surprise is when your business manager goes, "This surprised us," as opposed to a normal kind of difference. But if something surprised you, you didn't see it coming. Is it something we can make sure we can put some system in place so we're not surprised again next year? And is there anything, as Bob said, anything that's happening in the budget that we should take into account when we do our budgeting for next year? And then the last one, I always say, can I explain the FMR to my mother? Now, my mother's a very sharp lady, so I'll go with that part. But if you should be able to sit down with somebody and say, this is the overall questions, this is why, this is not line by line, but this is in general, this is the story that the FMR tells me, and this is how the board's using this data to better manage the school. Okay?
Okay, may I?
Yes.
Now we're going to do a little segment on capital planning and then finish with audits. How did I do that?
Wow, pretty neat.
Okay, see, we told you that's not our wheelhouse.
Read us the meaning and we'll be good.
Let's see. Well, on my slide, it doesn't say that. Let's see. Capital planning process. Help me here, Gene.
Year 1 and 2 should be pretty clear. 3 and 4 placeholders. 5-year plan.
The 5-year plan, that sentence says, mine says year 1 and 2 should be pretty clear. Years 3 and 4 are placeholders. So you're going to see a capital planning process in the next slide that just says this is what the high school plans to spend for the next 5 years. We focus on the first 2 years in that chart as being, the first year is going to inform us what we're going to put in articles, or we're going to have conversations with the boards about need to invest. The years 3, 4, and 5 are just kind of giving us all an idea of the amount of money that needs to likely go into the school for capital needs to keep the school in the shape we want it. And generally, schools don't do a good job at any of that process. They, over year, have compromised the operations and maintenance side, the support side, because it's far easier to take $100,000 out of operations and maintenance when you're in a budget crunch than it is to take 2 teachers out of a classroom.
Yeah.
So we typically have schools that don't generally keep pace with what they need to do, and then spend a large amount of money in the community to get it back into the shape it should have been. So we're trying to turn the tide with some of these tools. But that's the use of the capital plan process. We also pull it out of the budget experience, so we're not trying to do this in the middle of November, December, and January when temperatures and angst is at its highest. We do it in September and October. We got to kind of get it out of the way before we get into the budget process. So we already know what's going to probably be added to the budget or factored into the budget for capital. And we do this one on a monthly basis, subject to if things are quiet, we don't have a lot of changes going on that side, we might skip a meeting or two. But generally at the high school, we met monthly with a small group of the board to kind of kick the tires on what projects are in process, what got done, and what we have in the future.
So this is just a copy of what we've been working up for our capital plan. I can tell you our director of operations is not Kurt's favorite thing to do, but he tolerates us and he tries to do the best he can on what the projects are that need to happen over the next 10 years. Just wanted to point out on here so you can see. So say he says, okay, $340,000. I need $340,000, next year to do the projects. Now, unfortunately, if you go to the next one, this is what our capital fund balance looked like. In the upper right, you can see we had $343,000, and we'd already planned on spending most of it. So in the year that we're in now, we had $343,000 available. We had projects lined up to spend it, and we're going to end up with $68,000. And yet the next year he needed $343,000. So that's when we started the discussions around a bond. So we had a bit of a small bond, because if you keep up with this, we had a $500,000 bond, which is small for the whole CVU community, 4 communities. So by keeping up with it, you can come to the community with smaller ones. It's just easier than waiting and having to go for $17 million. So this sheet here is how we kind of keep track on it with the current year. So these are all the different projects that Kurt's working on, and he sort of how much we penciled in as a budget for them, and then how much he spends on them and when they're closed out. And then the other page is sort of feeding the next year's.
Yeah, so it's our process discipline. This is the financial statement for that fund, updated monthly. Boards have the responsibility to open an account and fund it. So if Kurt has determined we need to spend something in paving, he will propose to the board that they open an account or a project in this amount, funding it with either the balance that's already there or from some other source. So there's an intervention on the part of the board to kind of manage this and determine where money is spent.
So then, rather than having one generic capital reserve account, you can have an account for a specific purpose, as you mentioned
different
before.
projects within the account.
We don't do that, right?
Haven't.
Yeah.
Like AstroTurf.
In a library.
You can have our title for that. we aren't using it at the moment.
Do you have kind of a minimum amount that you would open or I mean, if you were doing something for $15,000, would you open up a separate project account for that?
Excellent question. We're a little bit flexible to that, but in general, expenditures that are part of the operations and maintenance of the school on a regular basis, like carpet replacements or painting or
aren't going to be in
the
there.
normal upkeep that doesn't extend the life of the asset should be on the operations and maintenance budget. And things that unfortunately either happen or because of the life of the asset are now needed, something dies, that'll end up in here. But 15,000 is probably a good mark. You don't want to be running 37 projects at $5.87.
Right.
Gene, and you've got a column. You'll see the smiley face above 70. That is extremely important to note. That is the retirement year of the facilities director at CVU.
Okay.
It's his bit of,
Question anything beyond that point.
Yeah, the only other thing I want to say, this is kind of handy to have this, that the board have this in front of them when we go into budgeting, is when you start trying to either fund the maintenance line that's on your budget. You know, you say, look, guys, we have a lot of projects that need to happen. We need to put some money in there, even though we don't want to, we need to. The other thing is just to have the board, say you had a $500,000 roof that needed to be, out there. You want to start making sure that you make those decisions about your general fund balance.
Yeah.
Now you can put it into the capital fund for the roof that you're going to need in 2020.
Yeah.
So as long as otherwise, we were just in a reaction mode where we find out, oh, we need a roof.
So-
yeah, Shelburne's spending $9 million, and it's basic this year, and it's basically because they haven't spent any for 15 years. Same thing with Williston. This is an attempt to try and get off of that as a process and put money into the building on a regular basis.
And so you're in this example here, 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19 are all sort of bigger than the future years. Is that just the way budgeting goes because reality strikes and you can't predict everything, and so the closer you are, the bigger that number is? Or is this just you guys catching up on some old capital projects?
I think it's for CVU's in pretty good shape. They've with the $23 million that was spent in 2001, 2002. They're not having the burden that I just described Williston and Shelburne on.
Yeah.
So there's it tapers off more quickly than other schools. Most schools would have a big $2 million out there, which is something the school board and the community doesn't want to touch, but goes there.
Yeah.
So for example, Charlotte has a 1949 building that eventually will just implode.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to deal with it. So
Right.
so they've got a very
Right.
different chart. But I think that's healthy. Kurt's not identifying major things out in the future that he hasn't already factored in and taken into account.
Though I do think, no offense to Kurt, but usually people who are operations guys are very tactically oriented. So we do often have to push him. Well, how about this? Well, how about this? Well, how about this? So,
Yeah,
he does need a little
particularly in the out years.
Yeah,
Right.
after his retirement.
After his retirement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And then the last one.
Okay, we'll do, how did I, there. Audits. So, Mike, I'll offer you, since we can't do audits justice in anything less than about an hour, we do an audit training with the board committee responsible for audits every year prior to the audits coming back to them from the auditor, to kind of remind them of their responsibilities, why it's important they take the role seriously, and what they have to do in the course of 2 meetings between understanding their work and then when they meet with the auditor. Your audits, you are the recipient of the audits. It's your contract that you have with your auditor. It's not your business office. The auditor is coming in at your beck and call to give you satisfactory service. So you need to be a visible part of the process. And to the extent the board, because they're uncomfortable with the document or uncomfortable with the process, just doesn't dig in, that's going to be dangerous. You really need to respect it as it's your responsibility as a board. You need to have done it well enough that you don't get into trouble like some of the districts around us, and then lo and behold, their audits, they're in deep trouble and their audits didn't give them any glimpse or glimmer that that was the underlying case.
Right.
So that's why I think training is important. The audit document presents a statement on the financial records that the school finished with in the prior year. Are they reasonable and accurate to what actually happened that year? The auditor has a whole lot of techniques to determine that, but you need to understand the language of the auditor when they're trying to tell you there's problems you need to deal with.
Can I just jump in and say though, because this took me years, and I do finances for a living. You think I get this? The audit, you hear audit, you think, okay, if I pass the audit, it means no one's stealing from me. Mm-hmm. And it's just really important that the school audits are not testing for that. They may be testing a little bit to see if you have processes in compliance. They're not testing to see whether or not someone's stealing from you. They're testing to say, the reports that you publish to the community, do they accurately reflect what's happening in the school, or in school financially? And so they're testing your management, you can say it better than I do, but it took me a really hard time, a long time to understand that, to your point, Julian, right? Is
Yeah.
that it is not the way that you say, okay, we passed the audit, no one's stealing from us.
Yeah.
That really is about your control processes, your clerk and making sure that everything fits and ticks. That's how you make sure that no one's stealing from your school.
Right. They're in essence, to your point, they're in essence saying your presentation of financial reports for the end of the year are reasonable and accurate based on techniques they have to audit. That's all they're saying. The end year report's pretty good, and they didn't find any glaring discrepancies over what really happened and what you reported happened.
So a next step for us would be doing the audit training in the
Yeah.
fall.
I will send you the PowerPoint that we use, and you'll likely want to cut it down to about half, particularly the first time. But yeah, you should circle around it. But the audit, the other thing that I try to emphasize is, and Jean touched on this, that if you're a board member who reads it and says, the auditor said we're A-okay, and you close the book, you've lost a big opportunity. While the auditors are not there to tell you that your something illegal, immoral, or unethical is happening within your four walls, they are an excellent resource for both the board and the staff of the school to get a handle on whether their processes are in good shape, whether the checks and balances, the process controls you've got are reasonable and appropriate. So we use them every year to do the audit, and then have a management section where they just talk man to man with us or whatever, and say, these are the next things I would do to kind of tighten, improve your processes.
Okay.
So that's why I say with us, they move from the general fund, get that one all comfortable that we know what we're doing and we're doing what we should. And then I haven't been in a school yet that didn't have things they could improve in the handling of student activity accounts. Right. Or food service funds. You don't have that problem?
We're good. We're good.
There. So anyway, so take advantage of them,
Yeah.
use them. You're giving a chunk of money.
Thank you.
Check, check, check.
Check,
Yep.
check, check.
Check.
Yay.
Hey, thank you all very much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank
Any
you.
remaining questions?
That was really helpful.
Yeah, that was really helpful.
Yeah.
You stayed away for the whole thing.
Right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry it took longer than we anticipated.
No, it's very helpful.
Right away. I'm not scared.
All right. I think we can probably just close the lid on that. Are we pretty much done?
I think so.
Do that.
Awesome.
Great, good night.
Thanks
Thank
again.
you.
Thank you,
guys.
Bob. Thank you, Jean.
Okay.
Okay, we are, let's see, at this time down to the global engagement interpretation. Sean, if you want to
Woohoo.
preface.
Is this based on the conversations we had in February?
It is.
Yes.
Let me
It'd
find
be funny
it.
if you said, actually, no, I didn't think about
No,
that.
I just made something different.
So what,
It's creative writing.
right, and so what happened here is it's just all incorporated into what we're now, I think, total interpretation of the end statement.
Wow.
I
The
know.
first
that
two
was-
are there
Yeah,
as they were,
okay.
college and career ready. And then local and global engagement is added.
So how I came up with the interpretation and
Yeah.
then the skills and the knowledge below that is I tried to follow a similar format from the first interpretation. And I guess what I'd like feedback on is it too standardized? Because I think engagement with local and global community is maybe not quite as clean as college and career ready in some way. But I want to make sure that we keep the GXs, which I think all of those GXs really represent the ability to engage, the skills that are useful and engaging with your local and global community. And then the specific knowledge, and that's where it goes to the rubric that you also had included that's been developed in the high school, middle high school. So breaking it down from the GXs into what are the concepts and then what are the vocabulary that students will need to know and understand in order to engage with their local and global community. And then the last part of it is from the quality standards from the State Board of Ed. which is a link
The
back to
last
the,
page?
the first, the
Mhm.
very last piece. And then I linked it in that document. Also, the next 2 pages are the rubric and then the listing of the specific vocabulary that have been identified.
That's the state standard one?
No, this stuff is locally produced.
Oh, sorry, which one's the state standard one?
The state standard is
Oh, the link,
at
the
the
link,
very
I'm sorry, I
bottom.
got you, yep. mhm.
Yeah, global citizenship with the check mark there.
Yep, gotcha.
2 pieces this looks great, and then 2 pieces that I felt that the conversation really focused on primarily was perspective taking, where some of the culture and community vocabulary certainly talks about awareness of others and differences, and what I enjoyed about the conversation was also that bringing it back to themselves, being able to tell them their stories, and then the ability for perspective, from their perspective to another perspective, and then also the idea of divergent thinking that came up in the global piece of being able to think differently about themselves in relation to others, and I think that you kind of hit it in the interaction definition, communication, both verbal and nonverbal, as well as behaviors and actions that make a difference in how we connect with other people. And that might be where that lands or that lives in the interaction piece. But just thinking those 2 or possibly 3 things were certainly a large part of that conversation. Not saying it needs to shift, but just to bring it up as an awareness piece.
It's interesting because the one piece that I took out of both the local and the global engagement piece was not time on task, not punching the box, not doing 12, 15 hours for a year.
Right.
Because 2 hours can be enough with passion. Right? If you do something that you're passionate about and really get it, and that is the piece that curious how that works. That works in here, or at least to see it. I don't know if you can instill it.
But it seemed like that passion is also finding yourself in something, seeing yourself. Because certainly that piece of, we did talk about being, engaged wasn't really the right word. I think that you're getting at the passion piece, but where they're finding themselves in another culture or some differences because they've mined their own stories and their own connections. So they have access. Anyway, I don't know. I mean, again, it's coming to interpretations and then measurement, but.
Right. This is short of the measurement because we're looking for the interpretation at this point. It's how do you measure these things after, I guess, is where the
Okay, so we're just, all right.
passion, I think.
So we graduate with the skills and knowledge to
You guys invented this rubric, Sean?
The
Cultural awareness, interaction, and
yeah,
community
middle high
engagement?
school teachers did. Yeah.
Really, really, really good.
I was, went down through that and I started thinking of that hit what it is, how do you move kids up and through?
Yeah. I mean, we're trying to do this at Champlain College and struggling with it. You know?
Yeah.
You guys
It's
really
heady stuff.
did a nice job with it. It's especially the exceeding column. The meeting. I mean, it's just really nice.
So where do you utilize the rubric in the scheme of local and global engagement? I read the words, I'm just having a hard time piecing.
I think you look at the top where it says performance tasks, and when this is all in place, we would be saying to students like, this is here's the rubric, this is what you're responsible for demonstrating, now let's work to figure out how do you go about that.
Yeah.
What are the learning experiences that you can have to delve into this, finding the passion. Is it starting with your own story? Is it going out somewhere and doing something? What does that look like? And then and really drilling down into the vocabulary to make sure that students have an understanding, because these are some pretty high level concepts.
Yes, they are. Yeah. Well, and it definitely fits in with the personalized learning, the way you've just framed it. With what do you want to do, and how are you going to build this into the thing that you want to do? And it says, the culminating assessment will be share their growth and proficiency in a reflective essay or an alternative, at which point I started to think of the 7 million things that people could do between iLab and senior projects and all those sort of individualized things that you do.
Nights and all that
Yeah.
stuff, yeah.
That's really
But
cool.
that's where the passion is, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't feel for that topic at all, but this one here would drive me.
Yeah.
And it has passions in it. I seek and in the exceeding, I seek and pursue opportunities that connect with my personal passions or
Yeah.
creativity with opportunities to make a contribution to the community.
Yep.
Right, and it's got some.
It's got perspective. I actually share my voice and perspective.
You know, it's appreciating, celebrating own culture.
Mhm.
That's a piece of your story, and yeah, I mean, when I was looking through this stuff again, I was like, this to me looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm a student and I'm like beginning and I'm like, okay, now this is what I've got, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've got 6 of these
Yeah.
for the GXs.
Right.
And then I've got the GPs that say I've got to do this in math. I got to understand quadratic equations, and I've got to understand photosynthesis and things. Then I get to work with people to figure out how am I going to do that.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
put my own interests and passions into that, and then produce things to show that I've learned something.
Back to a good advisor who can work with 8 different kids to understand the broad
Maybe 8 to 15.
spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really nice.
What did you guys think of the interpretation and or the?
I couldn't find a good time to jump in.
Anytime, please.
All right.
Except now, because no, I'm just kidding.
Okay. Generally, we both thought it was really well done. It was really
Yeah.
well made. There's just something in the vocabulary, not the rubric, that we noticed. For under diversity, includes things like gender, age, point of view, ethnicity, different abilities, and race. It doesn't necessarily, I think one thing that should also be included that may not be specified is also sexuality as well. That's huge. And I think like as society is like moving towards being open about LGBTQ, that should be huge. Not sure if it was described in the vocabulary that's described here, but I think it should be more specified.
Religion's not in there either. That's a tricky one.
Yeah, not sure if religion would go with diversity or culture, but like religion might be its own separate. I'm not sure about religion. I can't really speak for it because I'm not
Religion's under
religious.
culture. Customs include
right,
things
there
like
you go.
clothing, religion, family
Okay.
styles.
There we go.
Okay, and
That makes sense.
Yep.
Or you could talk it in there pretty easily.
Well, and many of, but not all of, the protected categories as described in federal law are in that diversity line. And maybe they should all be there.
also for I'm looking at interaction. I was just curious for the action aspect when it's talking about both verbal and nonverbal, as well as behaviors and actions. Just clarifying behaviors and actions, meaning like some physical interactions too, because sometimes culturally there are differences in how people interact with each other. So is that just what that term is trying to say?
I think so.
Okay, like physical interaction. Okay, that was just for clarification.
Although it could be, I mean, actions is pretty broad.
Yeah.
You're picking out something.
Could be
a lot more
like because it says
specific, but
verbal.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they were
Before.
thinking about that when they wrote it, but.
Yeah, well, behavior is physical action.
It's action.
Or could be.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you think it's missing? It's not specific enough?
Yeah, I think so. It's just I was reading through it. Maybe
Yep.
had to read through it like once or twice, and then Ladoni pointed out actions and behaviors.
Would it also, what you're describing, be in culture in the middle customs, the way people get along with each other?
Mhm.
Is that what you were thinking? Like, is
Yeah.
it space? Is it the way the people greet or?
All of those. All of those in a sense. And one more thing. We just wanted to point out under the GXs, under 1 on the first page. It says that for 2 of the required classes are not yet required. Financial literacy and economics are not yet required in our school system nor statewide.
Under global citizenship.
Yeah. So we weren't sure if that's going to be a future requirement or just there on accident.
I personally think that personal finance taught by Ms. Paquette should be a required class because it would really cover financial literacy, economics, would really help out with
Right.
that.
It makes no difference what your path after high school is
You
to the
need it.
pertinent of that to your life.
You
right?
definitely need it.
Because you are required to take a business class, but it does not have to be personal finance. So you could just take
Well, you're not even
anything.
required to take a business class.
Elective.
You're required to take a elective
Elective.
or a practical art.
Yeah.
Is what it's called in the state regs. Versus a fine art, which is music or visual arts or,
You're talking about.
yeah.
So yeah, we weren't sure about the economics part. Financial literacy is our personal belief that it should be required,
Mhm.
but it's not yet a thing in our
And the
school.
economics, you said when you went to the Treasurer's Cup, right? That was an area that you guys felt like you needed to know more
Yeah,
about.
because we didn't have a class.
You didn't have a micro or macro class.
No,
Yeah.
John McKelvey taught a microeconomics class
but we were
2
freshmen.
years ago,
We were freshmen.
my sophomore year, I think, yes. And it was only half of the year, so it was only half a credit.
I'm
And
sure you can learn a lot in that, but it's just that
yes, you
we
can.
were freshmen when we were doing the
It
Treasurer's
is
Cup.
also, it is a short period of time, so not, it could be better. It could have been a better class. It could have had more, could be more fleshed out.
And plus, I think we're going for macroeconomics this year, next year instead of micro, more general, maybe. That's the
It's
idea.
interesting for you to come up with that observation after going through was the Governor's Cup, you said? The
Treasurer's
Treasurer's
Cup.
Cup, and looking back on a class you'd taken to
Yeah, all the
understand what was
schools,
in it or not.
all the schools that won the upper ranks, they also didn't have the required classes, but they took it because you need that information. Economics probably, maybe not so much as the level that they had of knowledge, but
I don't know.
it'd be good to have a basic understanding of at least.
Well, and you bring up a good point, which is there's value judgments to be made by the State Board of Education, by local boards, and input from stakeholders about what is most important when you're dealing with a finite set of resources.
Yeah.
You know, organizations and states have to make decisions about, are we going to make sure that every single student's going through Econ 101 by the time that they graduate? And financial, personal finance, or some other things. Because right now, especially in Vermont, and I'm sure in other places, there's not the ability or the resources to make sure that every student has all of those things that are listed.
Yeah, there is a financial literacy committee though.
Mm-hmm.
Commission.
Yeah, out of Champlain.
Yeah.
Champlain College was pushing that, with a lot of the regional banks and stuff.
Yeah, John, what's his name?
I'd like to argue that we shouldn't wait and make our decision based on what the state might do, if that's
Right.
something that is something feasible
Well, I think
and worthwhile.
the state is creating the aspiration, and at some point down the road we'll say, how are you doing this? But these are recently created, so they're not necessarily going to hold people's feet to the fire yet.
So, we have any other thoughts here, or accept? This would be then accepting the interpretation of our end statement as a whole. Metrics forthcoming, I would argue at this point. Just getting to the point of being organized enough to be gathering data is a point where I think we would be at. So, the interpretation, I think we've made a lot of good stride over the last year and a half getting to this point.
What about healthy, productive, and successful?
No, do we get to go into that?
Well, healthy, did we do,
No, we haven't.
I guess we did like a.
We did,
a
I mean, they
wellness,
told us what they were doing in wellness,
Right.
but we didn't do a
Focus on
conversation
learning.
on
Yeah.
healthy, productive, and successful the way we did.
We didn't do a forum.
Right.
Right.
which would.
Oh, that's right, because that would be the one last piece
Yeah.
in here.
I think you had talked about that would be the third part. College and career went together, and local and global went together, and then these three, which
Is
is
it-
obviously success. Yeah, it's interesting to think
Is
about.
is it one forum?
I know we did them individually and then married them all together. You know, we did a forum on career, we did a forum on college.
Okay.
And then
'Cause as I said,
forum on local engagement, we did a forum on global engagement, and we stuck it together.
Yeah.
So we could, I don't know, I think,
If we're gonna do it, though, I would like to make sure that we try to get at least those forums wrapped up by, if we could, the end of the calendar year of 16,
calendar.
so that we can have the interpretation early next year. I just don't want it
Yeah.
to go another year and a half. I would like to try to start getting to the metrics piece of it, to put the last, at least to say that we've gotten to the point where we're starting to wrap the whole thing up. 3 years we've made good progress.
Are they mutually exclusive?
That's, I guess, the question is,
Like, can we get metrics for number one while we're working on, you know?
Interpretation.
well, I think,
or-
I think we're getting the metrics,
Oh,
we're
yeah.
gathering the metrics now,
Okay.
but
Like college and career.
to be able to put the interpretations all together, I don't know if I spoke out of turn there that we're gathering the data, but I think
No, we are,
it's
yeah.
trying to understand what that is. I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
No, because I feel you about trying to move it ahead, and it'd be a lot of fun. I mean, those conversations are really, really interesting.
And it would seem like doing healthy as its own, because there's so many
So
layers of
much.
health,
Right.
social, emotional, mental,
Right.
physical, we've already
Yeah.
done a lot of wellness.
Spiritual,
Spiritual, all of that comes into certainly cross-cultural understanding and maybe successful and productive together. I don't know, just to
Yeah.
be able to break it up, we could think, but healthy is
Right.
deep and
Yeah.
dense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that standing alone. Access, food security,
Right.
access to medical care and that sort of thing. I don't know.
Yeah. There's a lot
Right.
there.
There's a lot there.
Right. We got the dental thing.
So 2 then?
That was the thing that
All
we
right.
like.
So maybe we can continue that in May. I'm just seeing one on healthy and the other one successful and productive.
Possibly, yeah.
Try
That
to
would make
define
sense.
how we would do that or what we would
Yeah.
do, but
I would like some
I'd
guidance
like
on those
to-
things that we invented.
yeah. I'd like to
Exactly,
move
that's not-
tonight along though, if we can.
We can I, one
Yep,
little small
please.
thing with the GXs, didn't engagement and learning turn into creativity?
Yes, it hasn't
Okay.
been changed on.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Just wanted to check.
And
Okay.
actually, all of these are simpler. They're critical
Right.
thinking, well-being, communication, creativity, persistence, and culture and community.
Perfect.
So they simplified everything.
Yeah,
So
I love that.
I'll
Yeah, that's
modify
great.
those.
Yeah, that's a great rubric.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, so given that, I would accept a motion, yeah.
Are we doing anything?
I think we want to,
This was discussion, I think. this
discussion
first
for
time,
now,
and then
and
it comes
we'll
back
come
next
back
month.
next time.
Okay.
Yep. It's all the monitoring reports, thank you. All right, anything else there? Good job, thank you. That was a good wrap with the forums. Item 8, executive limitations, the superintendent monitoring report on compensation and benefits.
That's a good idea, though. Student monitoring reports. I like that.
Student, maybe we should
Start
We
those.
can work on that. Stay with us.
And here is the finance manager's letter of support that was not in the agenda packet.
But referenced several times.
Yes.
Yes. it was.
So this, as with the other superintendent monitoring reports that have begun to go through a second cycle, there is little material change to this. The evidence in number 1 just updated in terms of duration of my contract. In number 3, if you remember back, there was a plan that was put in place when I had found that we had not built the compensation and benefit analysis for non-union employees, and we did that.
The only thing in 3 under the evidence is every 3 years, is that often enough, too often? It seems reasonable.
That's what I asked some of my colleagues about that, and that's what
It seems
said
like,
generally,
especially with a stagnant economy over the last
Right.
6 or 7 years, you probably get away with it a little less often, but, okay.
Yeah. Other than that, there's no substantive changes to the report.
Any questions there? Oops. All right, good. Under 9, student report to the board.
Sweet. Okay. April, freezing showers bring frozen May flowers is what we titled this section.
That's not even funny. I have frozen flowers.
All right. So as mentioned last month and also mentioned in the superintendent report, Vermont Treasurers Cup, students who took personal finance this year were able to participate in the statewide competition held at the state capitol. Our team of 5 juniors competed against 9 other Vermont schools in a competition for financial literacy and economics. We won, surprisingly, for our first time. It was really impressive for us to win 4th place, which was super cool.
Nice work.
South Burlington in 3rd, Mount Mansfield Union in 2nd, and Essex in 1st place. It was a great experience, and we're definitely looking forward to improve for next year. And so economics class would be really cool.
Yeah.
Well done.
April Fool's Day, April 1st, we, as mentioned last month as well, we had 2 teachers compete against each other in a lip sync battle. And so all the students were very, very amped up and excited for this event. Jessica Bruce, our teacher, and 2 other students danced their hearts out to Beyonce's Single Ladies, strutting themselves in solid black and slick moves. Shannon Bundy and 3 of her students, including myself, faced her in atrocious tacky outfits, dancing to Weird Al Yankovic's Tacky, which is a parody of Pharrell's Happy.
That is awesome. And was there a winner?
Miss Bruce was the winner.
Okay.
Students voted.
Students voted. It's okay. It's okay though. It was really fun. At the end, the MC and senior Nikki Dang challenged fan favorite teacher Mr. Webb to a lip sync battle. So that's the next one to come up.
Like in a year?
In 2 community meetings.
So about 4 weeks.
Yeah, so a month. Next we have the New York trip. On April 5th and 6th, the students that worked really hard to go fundraising, school store selling, and organizing finally got to go to New York City. It was rough at first with a 4:30 a.m. airport check-in and a 1-hour subway delay. We had a really fun time.
Brought to the airport.
The weather was really great. We got to check out lots of hot spots such as Chinatown, Little Italy, Times Square. We got to see Roald Dahl's Matilda on Broadway. We then got a beautiful night view at the top of the rock on a cloudless, clear night. It was just a great night. And the 2 days was really fun. It was an incredible trip. Next we have Vermont Youth Conservation Corps, VYCC. They're back again to work with us for their spring session. VYCC is the farming partnership where middle and high school students can go to a farm in Richmond to work with hands-on activities with farmers and get to grow and pick some local foods and plants and help them work on the farm. And
hot off the press on that one is that phase 1 of the farm to school will be the garden out back. Phase 2 will be the greenhouse. And VYCC and the crew will be tilling and planting the garden.
Nice. Taking shape.
Yep.
The annual JFK Scholastic Book Fair took place last week. I still remember that from my days. Another fun thing, Another fun thing was the talent show, which was on last Friday night in the PAC. There are lots of wonderful performances by elementary and middle school students, with a couple of high school entrances as well. The number is growing. In fact, a lot of the board members were present at the talent show. We had these two and
This side of the
yeah, this side.
Hey, it was. It's a musical right here.
Yeah. So the four of us were in the talent show, and I got to see Mr. McMahon watch us. So perhaps for next year.
So amazing.
Yeah, you guys are great.
Thank you.
Great. You guys were awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in the process. We videotaped, so we're in the process of cutting up the clips so that we can post them and stuff.
Sweet.
So to see.
Awesome.
And so hopefully next year, maybe the whole board can do something together.
My talent this year was jumping in the lake. Thinking
I did not do that, so we're sharing it.
Were city council members involved?
Yes,
In
yes,
the
at
last,
the
in
end.
the
Yes.
last number,
Oh, okay.
Deke and
We all jumped up with
Seth
him.
and-
Seth,
This
okay.
town is
Yeah, they
yours.
sang "We Are the World," right?
We all did, yeah,
And
everybody.
people, like, everyone came on stage. It was great.
People
it
were
was really fun.
crying. It was great.
Phone swinging with the lights.
Yeah.
In place of lighters, because I can't have that.
Good.
All right. Next on the list, we have last Saturday, there was a jiu-jitsu tournament. Twice a year, Winooski School District hosts the jiu-jitsu after-school program, and we also host the annual Vermont Open Grappling Competition for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so middle school students and high school students are open to join this after-school program to learn all about the martial art of jiu-jitsu, which is kind of like wrestling in a sense. Majority...
Open grappling?
Yes, open grappling. A majority of our students came home with a medal, many of those medals being awarded for first-time competitors. It was my first time competing as well, so it was really exciting experience since I've been involved with jiu-jitsu for a
Is there
while.
anything you don't do?
I don't know.
It's incredible.
And for prom, tonight we're having a Papa Frank's fundraiser. 10% of all the funds for today are going to our prom committee. So after executive session,
We should have the meeting there.
go to Papa Frank's.
The back table.
They close at 10.
Yeah, they close at 10, so if you guys make it in
Pressed.
time.
We're going to be pressed.
It might be close. So we'll be getting a check from them tomorrow. Hopefully a lot of money for our prom committee. And tickets, yeah. Tickets are still on sale for cheap until Friday, selling $15 for singles and $25 for couples. And after break, prom tickets are going to be slightly elevated, $20 for singles and $35 for couples until May 13th. And prom is May 20th.
So, yearbook stuff. On the high school side, photos for class superlatives are being taken all over the school. There's an interesting set of student pairs this year. It includes props for the photos. Yearbooks are selling for $23. On the elementary side, they have their yearbooks on sale now. They're being sold in the office or in room 27 for $10.
That's nice.
Next on the agenda, the class of 2018 has planned a penny war that has taken place all of last week and also until yesterday. And so for those of you who don't know, the Penny Wars is a competition between TAs, advisories, to see who can collect the most points. Pennies are the only positive points that you can earn. Nickels, dimes, quarters, and dollar bills are negative points. Nickels are -5 points, dimes 10, so on. And the TA with the most points gets a party prize, and all of the money will go to the class of 2018. And we will find out the winning TA on Friday during our community meeting, which I don't know about you, but my TA had a pretty great plan. We had like half of our jar full of pennies. You guys were what, $20 bills full of?
Okay, on the first day of Penny Wars, a freshman put a $20 bill in our jar, Mr. Dunn's advisory, and we were in negative 2,000 points from the start.
Make them go to the bank.
All right, and then
Yes.
also on the 12th, Aspiration Days occurred. Aspirations Day, for those of you who don't know, is a day dedicated to providing students with ideas and careers that will inspire their futures. This day is filled with incredible speakers, a Q&A panel. This time it was a business-related Q&A panel, workshops, and college tours. This year we had speakers Richard Haynes, the admissions director at USNH, and also a nationally recognized painter, and an inspirational singer-songwriter, Jared Campbell. Workshops included money management, college athletics, military futures, and so on. And college tours featured UVM and St. Mike's. It was a fun event that everyone really enjoyed. Next, every year the freshman class takes on a Shakespeare piece and performs it for the 8th grade and 10th grade students. This year, the freshman class today put on a play for these students. They performed Romeo, oops, my bad. 2 years ago, the freshman class would consistently perform Romeo and Juliet, but this year they changed it up by performing Hamlet. It was very fun, and very well done, so good job to the freshmen. The city of Winooski is showing the Lego movie for free in the Performing Arts Center on Thursday, this Thursday. Tomorrow night. Kids eat for free, food starts at 5-ish, and the movie starts at 6. May 5th through May 7th is the Vermont All-State Music Festival. Last year we had a singer represent our school, Keenwin.
Yeah.
And this year we're at a whopping 2 people representing Winooski at all states, Keenwin again and Rainbow Chen.
Yay.
We're both bassists too.
Really?
He's a
Yeah.
singer. He's the bass
yeah.
singer. I'm the bass player.
Oh.
Yes.
Winooski's all about that bass.
Good solid base.
I'm sorry.
On May 5th is the All States Parade, where marching bands from all over Vermont perform and march on the streets of the representing town. This year, our band will be at Missisquoi, Valley Union, and Swanton.
Oh, you guys have a marching band?
And we'll hope for no rain.
Yes,
Oh my gosh.
although we have played with through rain before, which was not fun at all.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Next, 11 juniors were nominated to become part of Winooski's chapter of the National Honor Society. They were nominated mid-March, and essays were submitted April 11th, Monday. This Monday. So they will hear back on the accepted members by the end of the week, and the induction ceremony is May 9th at 6. This morning, 3 representatives from Senator Bernie Sanders' Vermont office came to Winooski to congratulate Olivier Anois, one of the 20 finalists of the Sanders State of the Union essay contest. The aim of this contest was for students to write their own State of the Union address and talk about what they think is important for an American's life. Olivier talked about how he faces discrimination in his life every day and how we should try to overcome it. 800 students sent in essays.
Wow.
And out of 800 students, only 20 of them were picked for finalists, and he was one of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they shook hands, took pictures. He was handed the plaque of his essay. The representatives also talked to the classes of McQuinn and Clark, Maley, and Savage about the goals of Bernie Sanders and how crucial it is for young adults to vote. It was very inspirational. A little bit of propaganda in there, but it's cool. And last but not least, on to sports. So for baseball and softball, they live on. After a few chilly practices, they're getting ready for the season with scrimmages. Today they had a scrimmage against CVU. Yes.
We're overrun with CVU today.
I know,
Wow.
it's crazy. And then for track and field, there's been a very large turnout of students on the track and field team. Yeah, proving that track will be the sport of the spring in the future. They are still practicing, but with warm weather coming up, the track team is getting ready to dash.
Yeah.
That was hers. Track meet season is coming up very soon. Their first meeting was unfortunately canceled, but the next one should be on the 27th unless they reschedule the first one, which I'm not sure about. And then next week is break. April break for
Yay.
students. And that is it.
Hey, well done, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. A lot's going on. As
Yeah.
a
lot
new
going
year.
on. There was
It's
a
like
lot.
super dense. It's
Yes.
amazing.
It's like the end of the year is piles it up.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Right.
The track has been so popular.
Mhm.
A lot of variety
Cool.
Yes.
for a lot of kids. All right, 9B. Policy review 4122, substitute professional staff. Any discussion?
So one of the suggestions I would make is in our policy, the second paragraph, the policy paragraph is second. I would suggest moving that to the top so it's congruent with other policies where the policy statement is the beginning. And then it moves into responsibilities after that. Much of what's in the VSBA model, in terms of, let's see, unlicensed, licensed, and administrative responsibilities is in our procedures, which I think is appropriate, the way our policies and procedures are written. But it has our current policy, I think just switching those paragraphs. We have the up-to-date legal reference. The cross-references need to be shifted a little bit because those are procedures, but I can clean all those up. But a lot of the language between the model and our current policy is very similar. It's just that theirs is in policy, some of ours is in procedures.
But appropriately so,
Yeah.
based on the way we
I think so.
operate. Okay. So you're okay with the one with the just paragraphs switched? Okay. All right. Any issues with the daily rates that we need to consider for next year? If we're gonna bring this back in 3 years, is it worth considering anything there for budget and the working? You getting substitutes as you need them?
It's a struggle, but we also have one of the higher rates in Chittenden County
Of use?
for licensed educators to sub. Yeah. Most other, from 70 to 90 bucks, and you can make 110 here a day. So, in terms of the compensation, I think we're more than we're more than competitive. But I think the overall market in finding consistent substitute teachers who also have a skill set to be successful on a daily basis is challenging.
All right. Any other discussion there? All right. The other second policy, promotion and retention, 5123. Comments? Sean, you want to just your overall?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that's obviously missing from ours that's in the model is the concept of acceleration. That's both in the title and in the definitions. So I think that
It's
would
in
be
the
a
title
piece.
too. I didn't.
I think
really
that is a piece that we
recognize
should add so that we're consistent with the model.
So I had one just semantics in the very first line of ours. If we're going to keep that, it's his or her. I got to assume, but
Right.
just again semantics.
Oh, nice catch.
But as I get down into this a little bit deeper, the one big distinction that I recognize between them is pretty much the bottom half of our current one has, let's see, many studies conducted through the years indicated that at best practice is seldom successful and at worst sometimes has an opposite effect. That whole, essentially we're not going to hold anybody back is essentially what that whole bottom piece says. It's not in the state portion as, I mean, is that something that we really want in there? I know the discussion we had when we put it in, that was about 2 years after we were on the board, but.
What's interesting is now with proficiency-based education is the idea of time is the variable, in terms of showing proficiency in certain areas. So it would be interesting to see how, as we move towards a more, that system, how does that whole thing work about being in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, where that's going to be a lot more fluid around certain graduation expectations, the GXs, the GPs, and showing learning. So it's a fascinating thing. I think that traditionally it still coins a practice that research showed never worked.
Holding back.
That idea of a year's worth of growth looks different for different students.
But overall and through time, I mean, there was one comment down below, except if it's for absenteeism related If it's absenteeism related, then you don't really need the parental.
Right.
You can do that solely on your own, but, yeah, proficiency-based full implementation is what, 19
Yeah.
at this
Yep.
point? So
Yep.
we're a couple of years out, we'll be reviewing this thing one more time.
Yeah.
The whole graduation credits and we,
In the procedures?
yeah,
Yeah.
this really bumped up against X77, right? I mean, or the flexible pathways
Yeah.
to learning in some ways.
Right, and we, it's now policy 5.124, we changed the number when we updated the graduation requirements, so I'll clean that up. But in the graduation requirements, it gives, we left it open to credits or, so that we could have that flexibility moving forward until the smoke clears a little bit and we have more clarity about what we want in that in that graduation requirement policy. So I think for now in the procedures, I would keep things pretty much the same.
I think adding acceleration was a good one, like you mentioned, for advancement of students.
That one we'll have to do at some point in time with the proficiency base, just time is not, you're right, becomes the other end. So, again, are we okay leaving it like it is based on where we're going?
I think one of the things, you brought up the many studies part, that's weak policy language in my mind.
Which
You know, unless you're going to cite the studies and you're going to
Right.
update the research every few years, do you really want to put that out there? And it's not in the model. The model is much simpler, so I'm not sure whether you need that language. And then the last sentence, whether or not you want, I think this is an interesting one. It basically says that there has to be agreement. And it doesn't say by who, it just says agreement.
Well, among
I'm
parents,
assuming the
administrator,
parent.
and teacher.
Right.
But procedures, the procedures get at that.
Oh, it does say it in
As
the
well.
second one, mutual agreement among
Right.
parent, right.
Right, yeah, it did
Yeah.
do it down below.
In the sentence above it does.
But as you get into the procedures, it is that you have to get with the parents in March. You have to get
Right.
with them again in April a second time, so.
Yeah.
All right, so would you advocate for the,
I think you could take
State
pretty much
model.
everything out from our existing policy after the first sentence. So you could strike from traditionally the rest of that paragraph, and then you could keep, I think you want to keep that piece in about mutual agreement because it is in the procedures, and I think it is a good practice because you want to make sure that you're having those checks along the way for progress, so that it's not April and a parent's going, what? You're telling me now you want my student to stay back, and what's going on?
You would leave the last sentence, though, with the exception of
That's
with
right.
us.
The last sentence pretty much states it, doesn't it?
Right.
right, that covers most of the rest of it.
Mhm.
Bump that sentence up.
Yep. Yep. I think that-
Circumstances are agreed to by all involved.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, I feel better then.
Mhm.
All right.
So adding her at the first sentence, striking traditionally all the way down through the end of that paragraph.
Well, no, wait a minute. The
Yeah.
last sentence we're keeping, right?
No,
And
I
the
think
very
we're bumping
last-
this one up to be the last.
The very
Oh,
last
oh, oh, oh,
sentence offset, the second paragraph.
Right, the second paragraph, and then adding acceleration.
Yeah. And then are we adding in the procedures, adding to the credit thing,
That's
like you did
That's-
for,
we don't do procedures.
Right, but I will polish those up so that they match our current graduation
one you did.
requirements policy. Yep.
cool.
Okay, anything else? All right. I would advocate that at this late hour, we take the handling of operational complaints board. It's almost done. I think it's pretty close to written.
That's great.
And move that to, unless you guys want to review it right now, but I don't have the energy to get to that one.
I'm with ya.
I would like to move that one if we can to May. And Tori, if it's possible between now and May, maybe we can read through two of them.
Yeah. Be great.
and see what we get. This one was relatively short. I only had one question that we can
Okay.
come up through and see what happens. All right. Recent community activity, anything?
The request for award bid.
Right, sorry. We did
That's all
have the walk-in cooler ad of E. Yeah. Right.
And legislative change, you just went over, which I'm assuming.
Yep.
You went over purposely.
There's not been much out of the legislature
No.
in the recent past here, so.
No.
All right. Food service.
So, as has been mentioned in the past, we need to replace the walk-in cooler freezer. That is our responsibility in terms of ensuring that there's proper facility for the Abbey Group to do their work. And as Rebecca has written here, it is old and at the end of its useful life, so we put out for bid, following all the proper procedures around that. We had a tight bidding circle there, and respectfully asking you to award the bid to Mountain Air Systems, who was also the low bidder, and allow us to also have up to $10,000 contingency. And then below, what Rebecca outlined is that in the end there will be a limited impact to the reserve account for this, for the new walk-in cooler freezer, because much of it will come out of the food service favorable balance. The $10,000 contingency, which is a large amount for a $40,000 project, you typically wouldn't have that high a percentage. We're just we're being cautious because we're not sure what we're going to find on the other side of that in terms of the wall and the pad that's back there.
That's a good plan.
Okay. Efficiency Vermont kicking in some.
Right.
All right.
So, Travis doing the food service program. I thought we paid Abby for that, and Abby just took care of that, and if they made money, great, and if they didn't, too bad.
How can I explain this?
Is that a hard one?
It is.
Okay.
Why don't you let me write that up for you?
Sure.
It'll be
No problem.
better than me trying to wing it at 9:20.
Don't even worry about it. don't write it
No,
up.
I can do it.
It sounds like an interesting question.
Yeah.
An
No.
interesting
Conversation
answer.
It's the
earlier
financial
about it.
literacy.
It
It's a good
is.
question to
Yeah.
ask.
It is a
Yeah.
good question.
All right, so I would accept a motion to accept the bid for Mountain Air Systems and the $10,000 contingency for the walk-in.
So, can I just ask, I know it's the lowest bid, but are they a reputable place?
Yes, they are.
You
Yep.
work with them?
Yep, we've done work with them before.
Okay, great. Thanks. So moved.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
Thank you.
cooler and working. All right, that brings us down to, we did go by the legislative as we said. Anything for the next agenda? If you guys can think again about education needs, anything you'd like to see from an education standpoint, I gotta put next year's agenda together. I'll put the forums in somewhere early on.
How about the idea of education funding, not just necessarily our budget, but the whole.
Statewide
this,
education funding?
We were talking about trying to become advocates around education funding and sort of the education around that. I don't know what that would look like, but we had a pretty
haven't
rich
found
conversation about it.
I
about
haven't found anybody
4 or
yet
5
that
months
knows.
ago.
Do the audit
We
trail.
were all, fired up after, after our experience with the budgeting process in the state. So, education
All we gotta do
funding.
is find somebody who can do it. I haven't
Yeah,
found anybody
exactly.
who seems to know
Call
all
Mice
the
by
rules and
now.
regulations,
Yeah.
but, all right. Anything else? We do have coming events, spring recess next week, National Honor Society induction May 9th, and our next
Yay.
board meeting on the 11th. Good.
Okay.
I would at this point accept a motion to move into executive session. We are for labor negotiations and a personnel matter.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Opposed? All right.